Our story starts in a dimly lit cave crawling with the monsters that we love to hate. Goblins. Right now, they are celebrating the death of their chief. With the death of the leader comes the opportunity to take his weapon and other possessions. The big goblin lying on the floor must be the chief, and the little ones trying to loot his body are the mindless bastards. They can't even figure out who will take the wooden club. Two little goblins settled their argument over who gets to be the next chief in the only way they could. By fighting it out, whoever survives is in the right. If you see goblins fighting, you better close your eyes because they are very brutal. They would scratch, bite, and use every dirty trick in the book while cursing at each other. As for the rest of the goblin lair, they naturally gravitate to the violence. They would form a circle and cheer for the combatants to finish each other off. Among the audience, one goblin remembered that the chief had left some untouched prey deeper in the cave. Now that no one technically owns the prey, they can go and take it for themselves. There is one problem with that plan, though. There is a guy guarding the prey quite fiercely. That guy they are talking about is about to return to the prey spot and stand guard. This dude they were talking about was also a goblin, but he's not like the other goblins. In what way, you ask? You'll see. As he walks to the prey, the rest of the goblin lair stares at him with revulsion and hatred. He's been widely known as the guardian of the prey, a disgusting creature that covers his body up like a human. Some of the goblins think that he's just keeping the prey for himself, so they all thought of the same thing. They just have to follow the guard until they reach the prey. But some of the more cautious goblins wanted to wait a bit longer, as some guys had already gone to scour the cave to find the prey right after the chief died. Those are tough goblins too. Once the fighting starts, the smarter and more cautious ones can swoop in. Of course, the outcast goblin heard everything that these bastards were saying and whispering behind his back. Then he heard screaming, and the desperate call for help from a woman coming from deep within the cave. It prompted the outcast to run as fast as he could. As he laid eyes upon the entrance of the chief's room, the pleading for help grew louder and louder. The outcast ran faster than he had ever run before and slid into the dark room. The prey was fighting for her life and dignity as goblins held her down to the ground. She doesn't want to give birth to goblin children. The bastard goblins and the prey noticed the arrival of the outcast at the same time. She started crying and begging for help even more desperately, as the hot breaths and grubby hands of the goblins touched her body. The outcast appealed to the goon goblins to let her go, to no avail. In this room, skeletal remains of all kinds of creatures have been scattered all over. The biggest goblin in the room stood up to the freak outcast, insisting that the prey was now his after the chief's death. If the freak disagrees with that and dares to take his prey, then he could just die in the hands of these goon goblins. 3 goons charged at him from the front. They were clumsy, but they had the numbers advantage. Dodging is the only feasible move. The outcast can't believe that these low-level goblins are giving him a hard time defending. They ineptly scratched and bit his skin, tearing up his cloak, but the outcast gritted his teeth and locked in. He can't just die here. He's only getting started. He needs to survive. His desperation led to goblin blood being spilled on the floor. Once the first goblin was felled, the other 2 were afflicted with fear of coming next. The outcast has brought out his roughly made dagger to take one down and scare the other 2. He raised the janky blade and threatened to kill them if they did not leave at once. These bastards only act tough when they feel secure that they can overwhelm an enemy. But in the face of real danger, they would 100% fold. That is what's happening right now. They were so cocky while declaring that the prey belonged to them, but the first sight of a weapon made them run for their pathetic lives. Mr. Outcast heaved a sigh of relief. His adrenaline was up to the roof. The girl came up to him to ask if he was okay, and to thank him for saving her once again. Unlike the other goblins, Mr. Outcast never laid a finger on her. He would even lay his life on the line to protect her again and again. She doesn't want him to die or be harmed in any way, as he's not like the other goblins. The girl says that, and it has always been that way. Mr. Outcast here was once a human too. He first awakened in the same miserable room where prey was stashed. He did not expect that instead of meeting God after being hit by a dump truck, he'd be transported to another world with a system instead. Although he has one of those OP systems, it has still not been fully activated. Other than being able to see some of his stats, it does not seem to have any other useful functions. However, he has not been idle these past few days. He has been talking with this woman Prey for quite some time now. And from the stories and facts she told him, Mr. Outcast has gained some semblance of understanding of this mystical world. Unlike the previous world he lived in, this realm created by God houses various powerful races, creatures, and monsters. Like majestic dragons and insidious demons, humans have carved out their place on this warring continent with their fierce strength. As for the goblin race that he reincarnated into, They are widely considered the weakest and filthiest monsters in the realm. The scum of scum. That's also reflected in his abysmally low stats. Even among the goblins in this cave, he would belong to the lowest percentile in raw power. Mr. Outcast's name is Lin Tian, a level 5 goblin with God's blessing. He has no class yet, and he has a horrible stat spread. He has the racial skill of Gene Devour. Equipped with the rough stone knife, his overall combat power is at 30 points. In the past few days, he learned that there is a surefire way to get stronger as a goblin, and that is to mate with girls. You see, goblins have the ability to get stronger through constant mating and reproduction, but their race is incapable of producing female offspring. So, to reproduce, they can only mate with other female creatures, leading them to a life of constant plundering and raiding. But Lin Tian used to be a human from the modern world. Doing such horrific things is deplorable to him. The girl saw him skulking in the corner and told him not to worry, as after spending these days together, she could understand what was going on now. Lin Tian is different, and he does not want to live among these vile goblins. Just one look in his miserable eyes, and you could see that she hit the nail on the head with her assessment. She assured him that when the Night Order came to rescue her, she would tell the troops that Lin Tian had saved her. The Night Order is known to be always fair and just. Those guys will definitely let Lin Tian live peacefully in the village. Now that he's thinking about it, that idea does not seem too bad, right? The lady certainly brought up a feasible idea. Even if he can't activate his system, they just need to hold out until the humans find the lair and rescue the girl, putting her under protection. He can just survive first, and then slowly figure out how to activate the system and how it works. Before all that, it seemed like they would need to fight a few bastards, as the other goblins must have figured out where the prey stash was. Now that the goblins were coming back for more, Lin Tian hurriedly instructed the pink-haired lady to hide in their designated hiding spot. Hidden behind the rocks, she watched as Lin Tian brought out his rough stone knife. A desperate Gunnar goblin was maniacally running away from humans while fervently looking for something to mate with. He wanted to get stronger so he wouldn't be killed. Fortunately, the desperate but straightforward movement was easy to predict, and Lin Tian swiftly slashed the Gunnar goblin's throat open. At least now they know that some humans have entered the lair. Those guys might be here to rescue the lady. She immediately got up and ran towards the cavern's exit, expecting to see the rescue team, the mighty Holy Order. Lin Tian tagged along beside her. Upon reaching the spot where the action was happening, the two watched as a knight wearing heavy armor and a resplendent cloak cut down multiple goblins at once with a sword chi slash. Lin Tian did not know whether to feel fearful or relieved to see such a powerful human. Loader is a level 25 human swordsman with a crap ton of stats. His skills include the sword chi slash, sword dance, and the holy skill, sword return to heaven. Equipped with the judgment sword and platinum armor, his overall combat power is at 400 points. If you compare that with Lin Tian's paltry 30 points, the difference is astounding. This is his first time seeing such high attributes since he was transported to this world. Is this Loader guy really human? The lady did not hesitate to run up to the knight, smiling, waving, and calling him commander. Meanwhile, Lin Tian was looking at the dead goblins strewn all over the place. Then he lifted his gaze and saw something even more odd and alarming. The knight has raised his judgment sword, seemingly intending to slice the surviving captive. The lady Lin Tian has been protecting for days now. The little outcast goblin almost took the slash as he used all the strength in his meager body to push the lady out of the sword's trajectory. They clumsily landed to the side. The pain of hitting the floor hard is preferable to being cut down in half, right? Lin Tian was confused and alarmed. These people are supposed to be here for a rescue operation, right? Why are they turning their blades to a fellow human? Maybe it's because the cave is too dark that they mistook the lady for a goblin too. Loader looked down on the victims that disgracefully dodged his attack. The lady tried to appeal to the commander, introducing herself as Kelya. The scum knight just told Kelya to shut her mouth. Of course, he already knew that it was her, but Loader assessed that she must have been defiled by the goblins already. She might even be carrying a little evil goblin spawn at this point. He thinks it's ridiculous for a filthy thing to expect mercy from a respected knight. He brazenly told the poor girl to repent for her sins to the great Holy Mother. Kelya felt scared and helpless as she tugged on the commander's cloak while pleading. She insisted that although she was captured, she was not defiled by the goblins. She pointed at Lin Tian and asserted that because this brave little goblin was protecting her, she was kept safe and away from the rest of the lair. Loader just scoffed at her explanation. He proclaimed that if she's going to make up stories, at least make ones that are believable. Only a fool would believe that a goblin has a heart. Kelya can just go and meet her end along with these lowly and hateful creatures. Lin Tian can't believe it. Is this really the morality of humans in this world? Something pushed him to move and run. He grabbed Kelya and aimed for the exit at the other side of the cave to get the hell out of this situation. Using a simple wooden club, he intends to clash against Loder's judgment sword in hopes of buying just a little more time. He did not expect this outcome at all, but just as the knight's blade was about to cleave him in half, a mysterious glow shot into the room and lit up the whole spot. An angelic voice told Loder to wait up, and the knight complied, stopping his attacks and falling silent. Meanwhile, Lin Tian has been encased by a golden light sphere of protection. A blonde woman wearing a holy veil and controlling the golden magic while surrounded by heavily armored soldiers thinks that there is something strange about Lin Tian. Kelya called the angelic woman the Holy Maiden. She crawled towards Holy Maiden with hope in her eyes. The Holy Maiden accepted her with open arms and lifted Kelya off the ground. She handed Kelya to Commander Loder to the side and turned her attention to the goblin encased in her golden magic. She asked if he could understand her words. As far as Lin Tian knows, this woman is the Holy Maiden Freya, the spokesperson of the temple Kelya has told him about. If he wants to leave this place, she might be the only hope. Lin Tian stood up and confirmed the identity of the Holy Maiden. He asserted that he was not a monster of this world, and he used to be human. He just became a goblin because of a bizarre accident. He can explain everything in detail if the Holy Order would just take him along with them. Loder had to admit that the little guy did seem a lot smarter than those goblins that he slaughtered. Intelligent goblins are pretty rare. Freya added that goblins are usually stupid and lowly creatures that can't speak and think so fluently. With that in mind, this little one might be a gift from the Holy Mother. Holy Maiden gently looked at Kelya and confirmed whether the goblin was harmless or not. The lady vigorously campaigned for Lin Tian, saying that not only did he not hurt her, but he also protected her from the other goblins while providing food for her. Freya smiled and decided that since the little one was so special, they could take it back to the town. But they will conduct thorough studies before making a final decision. She stared down Lin Tian and asked if he would be okay with that arrangement. With no other choice, he trusted Holy Maiden, who is known to be a kind and empathetic figure. He agreed to tag along with the Holy Order. He was just relieved that he finally met someone who was willing to listen to reason. Staying in this lair only means death. He might as well go to a human town and prove his innocence. Freya raised her hand and made a bizarre gesture. That slight movement dissolved the golden defensive sphere holding Lin Tian. She turned around and ordered everyone out of the cave. Lin Tian came up to Freya to thank her for her kindness, promising to properly repay her soon. A twisted, smug smile appeared on the Holy Maiden's face. Lin Tian heard the sound of a blade penetrating through skin and flesh. He smelled human blood, suddenly painting the floor. Loder has stabbed Kelya in the stomach. The moment Lin Tian turned around to see what was happening, he was greeted by the sight of the lady who survived, and held on to the hope of rescue, falling to the ground in the hands of her fellow humans. Loder even stabbed her in the stomach, as he must have thought that Kelya was carrying a goblin offspring. Lin Tian was speechless, frozen in place at the utter horror of humanity's ugly side. Then he heard Freya's angelic voice as she demanded that Lin Tian repay her well the moment they got back to the town. He'd never heard something more demonic in his life. 1 week later, we find ourselves under the clear blue sky of a peaceful town. The plaza bell rang, demanding the attention of the townsfolk. In the town square, a stage has been set up by the Holy Order as Commander Loder gives an impassioned speech to the villagers, the children of God. He emphasized the great harm that the previous goblin raid had brought to the peaceful Bright Town. The goblins used despicable, sneaky attacks to slaughter 30 residents of Bright Town, an unforgivable challenge to the authority of the Holy Order. Hearing this made the townsfolk relive the helplessness and anger they felt for the damned goblins. They demanded blood for blood and an eye for an eye. Humans and goblins are mortal enemies. Loder continued that the Holy Order, on behalf of the temple, has purged these hateful goblins, successfully avenging the fallen villagers. The Holy Maiden stepped forward and called to the people to continue praying and devoutly offering themselves to the temple. With her angelic presence, she grazed the townsfolk with a symbol of hope and purity, as she promised that the temple would always protect her devout followers. The townsfolk ate this act up as they chanted celebratory shouts to the knights and the temple. Meanwhile, in the Holy Maiden's quarters, the atmosphere was drab and dark, seemingly ill-fitting of her status and what she represents. Looking at an esoteric text containing some iffy diagrams and magical scripts, she heaved a sigh of relief that today's sermon was a massive success. As always, the people are as foolish as ever. While holding a red vial of liquid, Freya, in her casual wear, was pleased that the townsfolk would pray even more devoutly to the temple and, in turn, offer more tributes to her cause. She was not just talking to herself, as someone had been locked up in her quarters for a whole week now. Hearing her captive's voice soured her otherwise successful propagandistic venture earlier. Lin Tian has been bound, gagged with a metal mask, tortured in every way possible, had his left eye gouged out, and suffered the most inhumane treatment possible. Hanged in the wall, his bloodshot eyes shot daggers to the damn witch that put him through hell on earth. If Freya looked at him with indifference, the goblin still holding on for dear life was a testament to his strong vitality. It is no wonder why the temple can't seem to eradicate these pesky goblins from the continent. Since she has some free time right now, maybe it's time to see how poison affects goblins. Hearing her spout all these vile things with her angelic voice made Lin Tian sick to his stomach. He yelled out with all the anger stewing inside. If Freya deceived him just like how she's deceiving everyone in Brighttown, she even had Kellia killed, an innocent survivor. This is what the so-called Holy Order does. This is their so-called human justice. Speaking out against the demonic Holy Maiden carries its consequences. This time, it's getting a wooden stick shoved deep into his mouth, causing Lin Tian to throw up blood. If Freya finds it strange that a weak and trashy creature like Lin Tian, a lustful goblin, dares to question her brand of human justice. In her mind, this little guy bewitched Kellia. That lady speaking up for a measly goblin is a betrayal of humanity and the Holy Order. Her death was her final loyalty. Holy Maiden is already set in her belief that goblins are nothing more than vermin on this continent, a race of good-for-nothing creatures that only bring grief. For a Holy Maiden to speak to, one should already be considered a great favor. She thinks that Lin Tian shouldn't be full of hate but be more appreciative instead. He should just use his small and disgusting body to contribute to human and Holy Order experiments. Her hand glowed with a golden gleam. A magical circle appeared behind Lin Tian, and what followed was the unbearable pain of being burned by the spell. The magical fire burned his hatred and converted it to utter hopelessness. Lin Tian asked himself if this was it. Is he going to die such a miserable death so unwillingly? Maybe it was all his fault for being too foolish. He was reincarnated from a human to a low-level goblin and thoughtlessly held onto his human compassion while thinking that the Holy Order was righteous and kind. Lin Tian's weakness and naivety were his deadliest mistakes that led him to the Holy Maiden's torture dungeon. After being taken back to the human village of Brighttown, Loder and Freya took turns torturing and toying with him in every possible way. They never believed a word he said, no matter how much he pleaded. Ultimately, Lin Tian would not last long, being toyed to death by a sadistic witch and her depraved inclinations. His second death was excruciating. It was the worst way to go. If he could do it again, he vowed to never trust humans. If he could get a do-over, he would do it right. Lin Tian, the goblin, would grind their bones and drain their blood. He will make them suffer just as they pushed him to the brink of insanity. Well, that's only if he could live again. Lin Tian opened his bloodshot eyes in confusion. He looked left and right and felt life. How is he still alive after all those painfully twisted experiments? And where the hell is he? To answer his question, the system promptly appeared to tell him that the Goblin life simulation system had been activated. His final evaluation was that he died. Due to his foolishness, he forgot that he was a goblin, and that humans would never trust a goblin, nor would they pity one. He died in torment, and the pain of this week-long torture will be imprinted upon his soul. Suffering one of the worst fates for any transmigrator, he will be given a restart for a new life. So, this is the system, one that only activates upon death. If he's reading everything correctly, this means that he can be brought back to life, but it seems he will be reborn as the lowest creature once again, a common goblin. Just to make sure, he asked the system what his yes or no choice represents. It promptly answered back that if he chooses no, his soul will dissipate, a permanent death. If he chooses yes, he will retain his current memory and system, sending him back to the Goblin Cave a week before his death. All these parameters might seem a little confusing at first, but he eventually got it. With a twisted smile, Lin Tian reckons that this is the universe's way of giving him another shot for revenge. He must pay back every sick and twisted thing that Loder and Freya did to him. Without hesitation, he chose the option to go back in time and change his decisions. The only thing fueling him was a sick desire for vengeance. From now on, his Goblin Life 2.0 will begin. No more Mr. Nice Guy. The void surrounding him dissipated into a digital mess as the process of transferring his body to the Goblin Cave commences. When the process was done, he was given a little something to help him survive a bit longer in this second iteration. The system has slightly strengthened him. Lin Tian looked at his hands and felt a little lighter and more robust. The enhancement really was slight, as the system said, but it's a lot better than nothing. The system warned him that although he had been reborn, the danger was not over yet. By this time, the human holy order is about to reach its location. If he dies again, the system will not be able to revive him once more. It's just as Lin Tian expected. Right now, he has to think of ways to deal with the holy order's inevitable arrival. He can't let his guard down even a little bit. First, he asked the system what it could do. Well, the system is called the Goblin Life Simulation System. It enables him to simulate his life to foresee future events. Every choice he makes will lead to different outcomes. Each simulation goes on for 24 hours. At the end of that, he will earn points that can be exchanged for items. Seeing the future through simulations is nothing to scoff at. Lin Tian reckons that he can certainly work with this. He opened the prompt and quickly started his first life simulation. The current scenario is a mission to escape the Goblin Cave. With Holy Knight Loader discovering the Goblin Lair, Lin Tian needs to make the following choices. The first option is to warn his fellow goblins and unite to face Loader, Ifreya, and their men. This would yield 10 points. The second option is to abandon the other goblins and escape before everyone gets wiped out. This would yield 5 points. The third and final option is to hide in the cave and just pray that Loader and the Holy Order don't find him. That's a crisp 0 points added. Lin Tian took the time to carefully consider all the options. Although he was given 3 to choose from, some options are hopeless. He knew that even if all the goblins in the cave united, they couldn't match Loader's monstrous power. Escaping is the only thing that can save him. But thanks to the system, he can simulate the first option, the one with the highest score. If he can exchange those points for a weapon, he might be able to defeat them with a sneak attack. Just as he thought, the simulation ended with his death. He would be able to successfully lead the goblins in a desperate battle against Holy Knight Loader, but the large gap in strength would get every goblin wiped out. The system advised him to recognize his strengths before making a crucial decision. So, it's confirmed that relying on the goblins is not a feasible way to survive, but he still acquired 10 points from the simulation. Excited, he immediately opened the points exchange shop. He was greeted by the projection of multiple weapons to buy. Unfortunately, most of them were priced in the hundreds or even multiple thousands. Lin Tian's measly 10 points in the bank are not nearly enough. At least he found a dagger that costs exactly 10 points. It was an elven lightweight swift blade, a small dagger crafted by elves, fragile but incredibly sharp. He immediately bought it and equipped the new blade. It raised his strength by 15 points and his speed by 10%. It really was exceptionally sharp, basically worlds apart from rough goblin weapons. If he could hit a vital spot, a one-hit kill could be possible. With that out of the way, Lin Tian has one more question for the system. He was sent back a week ago, but he can't see any trace of Kelya in the cave. Where did she go? The system explained that due to Lin Tian's rebirth, some timeline details have changed. In this timeline, Kelya was not captured in the Goblin raid, and she continues to live a happy life in Bright Town. Lin Tian was surprised to hear that the young lady was safe and sound. She did not have to endure the trauma of being captured by goblins and dying at the hands of her rescuers. A small smile crept up in Lin Tian's mouth. In some convoluted way, it looks like he fulfilled his promise to Kelya. In that case, he has no more concerns. There's no need to hold back against the Holy Order. But first, he must escape and survive. He found the narrowest passage out of the cave. The entrance outside is smaller, so the guards posted up should be relatively weaker. Lin Tian lurked around the cavern's opening and spotted 2 guards. They were talking about their disgust for goblins and how easy this job would be. He took his time while staying hidden, planning how he would tackle this problem. The guards were relieved to be assigned to the small entrance. Any goblins that run out would just be trash that can be crushed with one hammer swing. But they mustn't forget that Lord Loader ordered them to kill any girl who tries to escape in the chaos must be killed. They can't let any survivor reach the village. Hearing this made Lin Tian furious. This holy order and their holy rule would even kill innocent people of their own kind for no valid reason, let alone a goblin. He has no other choice but to fight his way out of these guards. So, he devised a plan and pinched his nose together to make his voice pitch higher. Then, he acted as if she was a girl from Bright Town, frantically pleading to be saved from the grasp of goblins. The guards were pleased that they were finally getting some action. All they have to do is kill this straggler, and Lord Loader will reward them. They slowly approached the cavern opening with a hidden blade. With a fake bright smile, the guard called to the fake survivor to come out and not to be afraid now that the knights were here. He did not even get to finish his deceitful spill before his blood was splattered all over the cave walls. Lin Tian came out with the eyes of a cold-blooded killer. His new blade was baptized by the blood of his first kill. Let the human slaughter begin. The second guard stared at his frozen comrade in bewilderment, who was shaking for some reason. With words of confusion as to why he was taking so long to kill some weak goblin, he headed towards him. He couldn't even imagine that something could go wrong in such an obvious situation. In his opinion, they were the hunters, and the goblin was the victim. However, Lin Tian didn't think so. From the moment the humans decided to betray his trust, they had switched roles. He only had one goal now, to become stronger and take revenge. Throwing himself at the guard who didn't realize what was happening, he sent him flying. Due to the effect of surprise, he couldn't react in time and lost his balance. Now he was nothing more than an easy target for our hero. Already in the next moment, his sword reached the enemy and left a large wound on the body of the warrior. The guy could not believe that some goblin could defeat him so easily. However, his thoughts were interrupted by a sharp pain that prevented him from thinking clearly. He couldn't stand on his feet and fell to the ground with a painful cry. Raising his frightened eyes, the guard looked at the goblin he and his friend had wanted to kill a few minutes ago. But now the situation was completely different. He had a feeling that the goblin in front of him was a demon, and he was partially right. Hoping that the goblin would somehow miraculously understand him, the man began to beg him not to kill him. Right now, it was the only thing he could do. He showed Lin Tian a medallion depicting a woman and a child, and said that he had a wife and daughter waiting for his return. It was quite ironic for our hero to watch the man who had not hesitated to try to kill him a few minutes ago, now asking for mercy under such a cover. The knight continued to justify himself, saying that he only did it because he was following the orders of a holy order. He promised that if our hero let him go, he would bring him a bag of gold coins and a human girl. The guard tried his best to convince Lin Tian, not even realizing how much he didn't care about anything he said right now. In his short life in this cursed world, our hero had managed to become completely disillusioned with humans. The order guard thought he could fool him with his promises and smile, but Lin Tian could clearly see the knife behind his back. Unfortunately for the guard, he never realized it. Seeing our hero as nothing more than a mindless goblin, he pulled out the knife and lunged at him with a snide laugh. The very next instant, blood splashed out, however, it did not belong to Lin Tian. Among the two of them, the only one who was brainless, and now headless as well, was the guard. The broken medallion and the dagger he never had time to use were left lying on the ground. It was finally over. After this fight, Lin Tian was even more convinced that he shouldn't trust anyone, especially humans. Suddenly, some noise and a bright light came from deep within the forest, which could only mean that Saint Maiden and Loader were already close by. Right now, he was far from being in a condition to oppose them. He needed some time to become stronger. After taking a shirt from one of the guards, our hero Lin Tian set off. He promised that he would meet Loader and Freya again, and then they would pay for all the pain he had experienced because of them. Freya and Loader came to the place where the two dead guards were lying. After seeing that they were dead, Loader wondered what had happened here. Normally, 2 guards could easily stop even 24 goblins, but this case was out of line. If there was a creature capable of defeating 2 armed warriors, it was most likely a mutant goblin. They were the ones who most often caused problems for the Holy Order. Letting such a creature escape would mean more trouble in the future. Loader and Freya knew this. Loader kicked the corpse of the guard, who in his opinion was just a useless piece of trash, unable to handle even a mutated goblin. Freya, on the other hand, was incredibly excited and agitated at the mention of the mutated goblin. Her unhealthy tendencies were making themselves known, and the memories of the days when she had fun with the mutated intelligent goblin added to her excitement. She was eager to get her hands on such an interesting toy again and have fun with it. As evening fell, Lin Tian was able to get far enough away to surely be out of Freya and Loader's reach. After a long and tiring journey, he decided to take a little break and regain his strength. His primary goal was revenge. He was going to do to the Order what they had done to him. Goblins could improve their characteristics by mating and devouring. By improving their own characteristics and producing offspring, they could raise a stronger next generation and expand their power. By putting this plan into action and becoming stronger, Lin Tian planned to make every human in this world live in fear of death, and every woman moan and howl at his feet. Suddenly, his thoughts were interrupted by some rustling that came from the bushes behind him. Lin Tian was immediately alarmed, as he didn't rule out the possibility that the Holy Order had continued to search for him. Therefore, as soon as he saw the clothed silhouette, he immediately rushed to attack without a second thought. Attacking the enemy first and taking them by surprise was always a good idea. His tactic worked. The stranger was indeed shocked by his sudden appearance. He was so frightened that he stumbled and began to fall to the ground. However, Lin Tian was still wrong about something. The stranger in front of him was a goblin, and judging from his behavior, he didn't mean him any harm. Our hero was quite surprised by this turn of events. but he immediately put his thoughts in order and became wary. Because of the betrayal he had experienced, he no longer intended to trust anyone so easily. In the next moment, however, the picture he saw before him made all his wariness disappear, replaced by astonishment. In front of him, a beautiful goblin girl was lying on the ground, looking at him with frightened eyes. Lin Tian was surprised, as he had heard that goblins could only be male. But the innocent creature in front of him was clearly a girl. After recovering a bit, the goblin girl began to frightenedly ask Lin Tian not to hurt her, as she had just come here to fetch water. The fact that the goblin girl could speak in full and clear sentences surprised our hero even more. However, when he checked her status window, everything made sense. According to the information provided by the system, the girl was a level 3 goblin. Her profession stated that she was a god messenger, which explained her unusualness. From the skills she had devouring and exuberant growth. But what caught Lin Tian's attention the most was the information that if a male goblin teamed up with a female goblin, then the male goblin would become a legendary goblin god. This information made our hero think becoming a goblin god meant becoming very strong, and this was just what was needed. He didn't want to miss such a good chance. Seeing Lin Tian's gaze, the frightened goblin girl saw it as a danger and started begging him again to let her go. She told him that if she didn't bring water to the village, the tribe leader would beat her to death. Realizing his mistake, Lin Tian apologized and tried to calm the girl down. He gently stroked her shoulder and said that he wouldn't hurt her. He couldn't let her cry as it might attract unnecessary attention. The best solution was to settle the misunderstanding that had arisen. Fortunately, the girl had indeed calmed down and no longer looked so frightened. Crawling over to Lin Tian, she excitedly asked if he could talk too, to which he nodded affirmatively. By nature, goblins couldn't talk properly, so it was very difficult for the girl to communicate with her tribesmen. The girl was very surprised by Lin Tian's kindness and care, as in the tribe, the other goblins only beat and scolded her. She liked being around him so much that she offered him to return with her to the tribe. After hearing about the tribe, Lin Tian started asking her about it. Since he still wasn't sure if he could escape the chase from the Holy Order, the best solution was to lay low and wait in some goblin village where he would be like the others. Such a sudden change in our hero's demeanor confused the girl a bit. But after looking at Lin Tian with her charming eyes, she still agreed to take him to the village. A sly smile appeared on our hero's face. He had long thought about where he could find his subordinates. Fortunately, the opportunity presented itself. As soon as they arrived in the village, armed goblins came out of the tents. They immediately surrounded the uninvited guest. Like all goblins, they were surprised that Lin Tian was wearing clothes just like humans. To them, something like this was new to them, and they had never seen such a strange goblin before. At the same time, our hero was assessing their numbers and was pleased that he had come across such a large village. Now he could begin to gain their trust. And he began by asking permission to join their village and meet the boss. The goblins did not like such requests at all, some strange guy coming to their house and demanding something more. Instead, they were going to catch this insolent guy, beat him up, and then bring him to the boss. Suddenly they were interrupted by a goblin girl who asked them to wait and not to attack the important guest until he meets the boss. This move should have delayed the fight for a while, but all plans were spoiled by the boss himself, who heard the noise and came out to see what was going on. All the other goblins immediately quieted down at the approach of the boss, and our hero tensed up. The boss was clearly not in the mood to be woken up. Lin Tian was tense for a reason. The boss had reached level 25 and was equipped with some pretty good weapons combined with an impressive set of skills. Our hero was surprised that this village had such a strong boss. And the unfortunate thing is that he will need to defeat the boss to take his place and get his gang of goblins to speed up his own progression. Entering the foreign goblin lair, the chief asked the goblin girl what the deal was with the outsider, and she explained that he had brought Lin Tian in because he had nowhere to go. That explanation seemed satisfactory to the chief, but not for good reasons. He immediately handed the order to kill the outsider freak and eat his meat. The tribe celebrated in a frenzy. Pulling out his knife, Lin Tian had to think fast for a way out. The only feasible idea that struck him was to offer his services to create new weapons for the tribe that would make them stronger. Hearing such an interesting proposition blunted the chief's bloodlust, ordering his goblins to wait up. This goblin priest started making his way closer to Lin Tian, seemingly scanning him from head to toe. Since the young orc does not have the distinct smell of a liar, the chief asked what kind of weapons he could offer. Hours upon hours of watching blacksmithing shows in the previous world have led him here. As long as there are iron ores, he'd be able to make simple tools and better weapons given some time. Given that the chief can speak in the human language, it's safe to assume that higher-level monsters possess higher levels of intelligence. Lin Tian put forth an idea that gaining iron tools would equip the tribe with the tools to stop fearing humans. The proposal was too tempting, so the chief gave in and gave Lin Tian 3 days to find ores and produce results in exchange for his life. The chief even bundled up the goblin girl's life alongside Lin Tian if he failed to do this job. As soon as the leader retreated to his quarters, the rest of the tribe followed suit. One thing's for sure is that the old chief is a ruthless bastard who'd kill his own kind in cold blood. Confronting him head-on is out of the question. He'll have to make iron tools to buy time while covertly getting stronger. That night, a scout party was released to the barren woods, guided by the moonlight. The group, including the goblin girl, has been walking all day and all night, so it's naturally exhausting. But when she showed even a tiny sign of fatigue, the rest of the goblins would quickly gang up against her to berate and beat her down. They treat her like a punching bag, seeing her as lesser than the average male goblins. This disgusting display of behavior earned the leading goblin a head injury after getting rocked by a rock through the back of his head. Lin Tian clarified that he brought these bastards along to help find iron and not to fight senselessly. He briefed them about the ore's appearance before heading out. If the search party wants to stay alive, each one needs to find one piece of ore in the valley ahead. Failure to comply and hit the quota would, of course, be punishable by death. Hearing Lin Tian say that while holding an iron knife made the goblins tremble in fright. A fire has been lit under their asses, scrambling in every direction in hopes of finding an ore unless they want to get clapped by the chief. Deep in thought, Lin Tian admitted that what he's trying to do is just temporary. He'd get killed in just a matter of time once he outlived his usefulness. But there's an obvious recourse through this. The system was practically telling him to mate with the goblin girl to attain the legendary goblin god status. So Lin Tian approached the crying bullied lady, gently telling her to stop crying. He even kneeled right next to her so she could hear what he was saying a lot clearer. Lin Tian proposed that they stay together. If she's under his wing, no one would mess with her. She will be protected, she'll get meat to eat, a warm place to stay, and some much-needed peace. He assured her that he was a man of his word. But they're too weak at the moment. To avoid being bullied, they both need strength. Hearing the possibility of getting stronger, the goblin girl's eyes glimmered with hope as she blushed. Without mincing his words, Lin Tian asked the lady if she would be willing to bear his children for the sake of power. Her timid response to that was par for the course. She had never been part of any kind of mating ritual before. But if it's the kind and good-hearted Lin Tian, she wants to explore a little bit more. She did not get another word as a response. She got a deep and mind-melting kiss instead. After the initial shock was gone, she was able to enjoy the passionate kiss more comfortably. Lin Tian slowly guided her body under his, laying her down on the cold ground while holding hands. Already having trouble breathing from the arousal, she pushed for Lin Tian to go ahead and give her his babies so they could get stronger. The first time it entered, the system pinged that the host would have a total of 7 children in this conception. Due to the talent limit, Lin Tian only gained 9 attacks, 100 HP, and 10 defense. When Lin Tian was done, he was drenched in sweat, his body exposed to the elements. The little goblin has reached level 7, gaining the title of Defiler. His overall combat strength jumped to 65. Not only did his level increase, but his form also improved with leaps and bounds. Right now, he'd have a much higher chance of winning against that goblin priest chief. Picking his human clothes back up, Lin Tian draped them over the goblin girl's naked body. From now on, it will be his responsibility to protect her life. She was just happy that a fellow goblin was being nice to her. But their romantic evening was interrupted by some hurried voice asking for help in a panic. It turned out to be one of the bastard goblins who accidentally bumped into a menacing demon wolf in the process of gathering ores. Lin Tian's eyes locked in on the iron ores. That's what they need. But the fool who got it brought back some trouble for the rest. Unsheathing his blade, he sharply stared at the incoming giant wolf while the goblin girl worried. The poor goblin that did not know any better taunted a brutal beast and was now about to pay the price. Fortunately, Lin Tian became strong and fast enough to deal with some severe damage as he stuck his blade on the wolf's neck. It was a one-hit, one-kill, and the fleeing goblin was speechless. Walking up to the ore-holding little shit, Lin Tian increased the intimidation in his voice to pressure the goblin to hand the material over. Of course, the little guy had no other choice but to comply in utter terror. Appraising the ore, Lin Tian guaranteed its high quality. If they could find some more, making potent weapons would be easy peasy. The next morning, a trail of smoke from the fire from the goblin camp could be seen over the forest. Lin Tian had just finished processing the obtained iron ore into a spearhead, and was now showing off the result of his work to the surprised goblins. The iron spearhead easily pierced through the skin and skull of the demonic wolf killed last night. Stone and bone materials would never have been able to achieve such a result. Even the goblin boss was surprised by the weapon made by our hero, and was even speechless by this. Lin Tian pulled out the spear from the wolf's head, and with a smile, explained to the goblins that this iron spear was something he had made himself from iron ore. The goblin that Lin Tian had saved last night immediately ran forward to confirm that he was not lying, and that he had indeed killed the wolf last night and made this weapon himself. The goblin chief immediately desired to obtain the same spear. Lin Tian used this moment to raise the spear to the sky and attract the attention of all the goblins. Once all the goblins were staring dreamily at the desired weapon, he asked if they all wanted the same spear. Of course they did, and immediately asked him to make them one too. The goblins looked at the spear as if mesmerized, with open mouths and drooling. To them, an ordinary iron spear was like a legendary item, but the way Lin Tian attracted the attention and respect of the goblin tribe did not please the goblin priest, who was now darker than a storm cloud. In the treacherous mind of the goblin boss, a cunning idea was immediately born to use our hero and then get rid of him as a growing threat to his authority. He quickly returned all the attention to himself, and in front of the whole tribe recognized that Lin Tian can make iron weapons and seems not to be lying. But that doesn't mean anything yet. If our hero wants to stay, he has to make 50 spears in 2 days. And that's not easy. If he doesn't, he'll become meat for the tribe. Even the ordinary goblins were surprised by such harshness of their boss, who has somehow become as bad and treacherous as humans. Even so, they were ready to help Lin Tian fulfill the chieftain's demand. Lin Tian looked at the departing chieftain and couldn't help but smile as everything was going according to his plan. The fact that the chieftain didn't kill him immediately was his key mistake. Now this idiot wouldn't be able to do anything. 2 days passed, and the day of delivery of the spears came. To everyone's joy and the chief's unhappy surprise, Lin Tian managed to do everything and threw a full basket of iron-tipped spears on the ground. All the goblins nearby danced with joy when Lin Tian informed the chieftain that he had brought what he had asked for. The goblin priest started smiling like crazy, and even pretended to congratulate our hero for completing the task. A few minutes later, all the goblins in the camp received an iron spear each, and it was time for the feast. The goblins lit a bonfire, and the chief invited everyone to celebrate Lin Tian joining their tribe, while allowing everyone to eat meat at their pleasure in honor of such an event. When the fire began to die down a little and there were enough coals, they roasted a fat, freshly caught boar, and the first biggest piece was left especially for Lin Tian. The goblin girl personally gave him this gift, as this sacrificial boar was left especially for him. Lin Tian hadn't eaten delicious meat for a long time, so he greedily began to eat. But after the first bite, he realized that it was a trap. The meat was poisoned. He fell to the ground and tried to spit the meat out, but it was too late. The stupid goblin girl had unknowingly served him poisoned food, and now she was panicking and asking what had happened to him. Just at that moment, the one who set it all up appeared. It was the goblin priest, of course. He immediately began to mock the stupidity of our hero, who, in his opinion, thought himself smart and strong enough to challenge the authority of the chief and seize power in the tribe. But the boss of the goblins warned him that nothing will work out, and on this path, only death awaits him. And as punishment for his insolence, Lin Tian will lose the things he values so much, like that ugly goblin girl he cared so much about. She will be the first to pay for her betrayal. With his sharp claw, he defiantly bled her, hinting at what he was going to do after taking the knife away from Lin Tian. The goblin leader would have continued his taunts, but suddenly blood spurted out in all directions, and the goblin girl's face darkened from the unreality of what was happening. Would she really die just like that? But the blood was not hers, and the free-flying hand of the goblin chief was proof of that. The goblin boss did not have time to put his threats into action, and only wasted time with empty threats, giving Lin Tian time to recover from the poison, or rather stop pretending. Now the goblin chief held his pathetic stump of an arm, and through the pain couldn't understand how this could have happened. Lin Tian only laughed off the old bastard in response. The real fool here was only him. In fact, thanks to the system, our hero knew that the chieftain would try to poison him. He was just acting to let him off his guard. The spectacle was perfect. The goblin chief lowered his head and remained silent. Not a single muscle moved, and it seemed that he was thinking about surrendering. But that was a deceptive impression. Then he quickly activated one of his priest spells and turned his bone armor into a weapon, with which he launched one last desperate attack on our hero. However, after increasing his strength level thanks to the goblin girl, it was very easy for Lin Tian to dodge. The unbalanced chieftain was in a very vulnerable position, and Lin Tian didn't miss the chance to take advantage of it. Gathering his strength, he delivered a powerful slashing strike straight at the neck of the former chief. His head rolled across the clearing. The other goblins were now staring at Lin Tian in horror, afraid of repeating their leader's fate. But killing them was not in our hero's plans at all. Walking to the center of the village, Lin Tian loudly announced that from today he was the new boss, and he himself would lead the goblins forward, onward to glory and wealth, to attack humans and elves. Now there will always be plenty of meat and girls, and no one will ever underestimate the goblins and stand in their way again. Hearing this, the whole tribe of goblins began to lose their minds with joy. They raised their hands to the sky and couldn't resist dancing and saying that Lin Tian was the best boss in the world who would lead them to the blissful endless meat. To confirm his promises, Lin Tian pointed to the corpse of the former chief and gave it to the goblins. At first, they fell silent in indecision, but then they rushed forward greedily, tearing even raw meat with their teeth. They were not going to stop, even though this pile of meat had once ruled them. Goblins are simple. The one who has power has power. Those without power are just fodder. Such cruel creatures our hero was going to use to fulfill his revenge. Now after conquering the tribe of goblins, he was going to capture more female elven captives to raise a stronger generation of goblins. Apart from the goblins themselves, a pair of eyes hidden in the bushes watched this entire show. An elven scout, she had been here since the beginning and had been monitoring the situation in the goblin camp, and what she saw now did not please her at all. Now she was going to report it to the elven village as soon as possible. The female elf named Kasana, who witnessed the whole problem in the goblin tribe, rushes back to the elf tribe to relay the information. She jumps from building top to building top just to reach her destination, as it seems the elves don't know how stairs work. When she gets to the top, one of the elf maidens refers to her as the princess and is glad she's back. The maiden tries to stop her from going inside to see the clan mother because she seems busy, but the princess doesn't listen because she has urgent news to report. The princess pushes the door wide open and starts to tell her dear mother the urgent news she had seen in the eastern enchanted forest. She is shocked that the engagement her mother has is with two hefty elf males who are pleasuring her and putting some grapes in her mouth. Kasana stops in her tracks because she hadn't realized she'd find the clan mother in such a position and quickly apologizes for intruding and turns back to go. She wishes she had listened to the maiden from earlier. The clan mother stops her and tells her to share her message because it must be urgent since she rushed to see her. The male elves quickly adjust and stand guard. The princess then relays that she has important information about the goblin tribe in the forest. The clan mother remarks that goblins are weak and filthy low-level monsters, and wonders what could be so important about them. The princess tells her that this morning she found a black-haired red giant bear in the forest that had been gnawed to its bone, and there were signs of goblin footprints around it. She mentions that the black-haired giant bear is one of the fiercest creatures in the forest, and goblins shouldn't be able to kill such a beast. She tells her she also saw the old chief of the goblin tribe get killed by a young goblin, and she thinks he might have something to do with all this. The clan mother is surprised to hear there's a new chief, and mentions that it seems the number of goblins in the forest has recovered quite a bit from when they had last destroyed them. While speaking, she signals to one of her male attendants to come closer, and she places her head and hands on his crotch. The clan mother tells her to take some people to clean up the goblin business, but she orders that she doesn't kill them all, but leave some of them alive. The clan mother explains that the potion made from freshly extracted goblin hearts is an excellent tonic for the male elves in the tribe. It helps their virility if you know what I mean. The princess just answers with a weak yes, blushing red from the awkwardness of the entire situation. The clan mother proposes that the princess take one of the male elves for the night as a reward for her hard work, and mentions that she can have more if one isn't enough. Talk about thirsty. Kasana quickly rushes away in embarrassment and says she'll go investigate the goblins and will report back if she finds anything. Meanwhile, in the goblin tribe, the lower goblins give Lin some intel about how the elf tribe is structured. They tell him that the enchanted forest has about 30 elf treehouses that are all very tall. Our guy tells the goblin who has spiky hair, as if he doubles as a rock metal band member, that he's going to give him 2 female elves as a reward for getting this intel when they capture the elf tribe. He later orders the goblin to tell the others to sharpen their weapons in preparation. Our spikehead goblin's face lights up with excitement as he conceives the thought of having 2 female elves all to himself. The other goblins just scream out in excitement and say, "Long live the boss." The spikehead goblin swiftly turns around to his assignment of getting the other brothers to prepare their weapons, seeing he has a newly found incentive to devote himself to the job. Lin, who just sits in front of the fireplace where the intel was gathered, calculates the number of elves they'll be up against. He figures that if there are 2 elves per house, they may be up against about 60 of them. Let's not forget about the 10 or so guards, which means there'll be at least 70. Our Lin Tian mentions that since the priest died, he's been busy leading the goblins to the mine, making weapons, and hunting monsters to level up. He goes to the rest of the tribe and tells them they're going to be going for bigger monsters. He tells them starting from today, they'll start hunting for major monsters in the enchanted forest, and the entire tribe screams in excitement. Their first attack is against a dangerous-looking magic boar, and they acquire the skill Giant Fang Attack once they kill it. It seems every successful kill increases the level of all the goblins, and they all acquire the skill from their prey. The second monster is a stone-like monster, and the goblins acquire the skill Stone Skin when they destroy it. Our guy and the lower goblins kill more monsters. One looks like a jaguar, and they acquire the skill Stealth. Another looks like a monkey, and they acquire the skill of Climb. Even Yue helps out with the raids, and it seems she's mastered the art of using the bow and arrow. The goblins also kill a large two-headed snake, and they acquire the skill Venom Secretion. All this is because the goblins have a secret skill called Devour that allows them to acquire the skills of whoever or whatever they eat. Due to their recent conquests, they've acquired many skills, and their overall skill levels have increased. Our guy checked the stats of one of his goblin soldiers, Spikehead. Spikehead is now level 18, still low level, now a beast slayer, has 231 HP, a strength of 29, and a defense of 40. He has also acquired several skills from every monster they've killed. Our guy realized that the overall combat power of each of the goblins is around 250, which trumps that of the elves, who all have a combat power of 200. He realizes that their tribe's overall strength has surpassed that of the elves, and taking their tribe will be a walk in the park. He checks to ensure that the goblin life simulation system has cooled down from when he last used it and is ready to run again. Just to be sure, he decides to simulate his attack plan to see how things are going to turn out if they attack the tribe with their present capacity, since the elf tribe is a formidable threat. He tells the system to start the simulation, and the system activates the goblin life simulator based on their present situation. A window pops up in front of him and presents the current scenario, which is the night before the raid. The system shows that our guy leads a greatly strengthened goblin army to raid the elf tribe, confident of success. But the elves ambush them and lead the goblin army into a trap, shooting them all down with arrows. Next up, he and Spikehead, his highest-ranking officer, are captured by the elf matriarch and hanged in the enchanted forest as a warning to the goblins to never mess with elves. The end. The system presents its summary by saying our Lin Tian thought it was foolproof, but it was actually under someone else's control. He gets a score of 0 out of 100 and no reward for running a failed simulation. Lin Tian is worried that this is how the simulation ends and wonders what it means when it says it's under someone else's control. He quickly realizes that there's only one explanation for such a paradox and declares to the other goblins that it seems the tribe is being watched by the elves. Our guy focuses hard to tap into the keen sense of hearing and smell goblins have, hoping to detect a trace of the elves around. Moments later, he detects something and tells the other goblins. He quickly runs toward the spot, and he finds Kasana, who is rushing back to the elf tribe along with her men. She tells them that she didn't expect such a big change in a few days, and hurries them up so they can return to the tribe to inform the mother of the latest development. While hopping from tree to tree, a couple of arrows soon land on the elf males, and one of them lands on the princess's behind, since Lin Tian needs her alive. They all wince due to the sudden pain from the arrows as they fall to the ground. The male elves seem to have been killed immediately as they were intentionally hit in vital places, but the princess just lies there unable to move. She wonders why she can't use any strength at all. The other goblins don't even listen to her but are just excited to run into a female elf. Kasana, who is now feeling drowsy, wonders if the arrow she was shot with was laced with poison. Our guy walks towards her and tells her he didn't expect to catch her so easily. He tells her she showed up just in time, since they're preparing for their grand finale against the elves, and the princess just lies there in horror. Lin orders the goblins to take them all back to the tribe, and they excitedly oblige. The next morning, the princess, who is fast asleep due to the impact of the sedative used on her, is quickly woken up by the goblin when Lin Tian approaches. They quickly pour water on her, which causes her to wake up. Her clothes look very torn, from being rough-handled by the goblins, and her limbs are tied up. Our guy grabs her by the head and lifts her so he can talk to her. Spikehead excitedly tells him that he ensured no one touched her, and he's reserved the female elf just for him. Lin Tian just expressionlessly stares at the princess and figures out that the body fluids of goblins seem to have a special paralyzing and stimulating effect on female creatures. This may be why the clan mother keeps harvesting them for tonic. Our guy believes this gives them a tactical advantage against winning the matriarchal elves. Kasana, who is boiling with anger, calls Lin Tian a lowly creature and asks him what gives him the gut to kidnap a princess and dare attack the elves. She tells him he thinks he's so tough, but they would have been annihilated ages ago if not for her mother's kindness. She threatens that her mother won't let them go if they as much as touch a single hair on her head. Lin Tian calls bull and says he doesn't think it's kindness that has kept the goblins alive. He tells her the elves she's talking about. and the ones his subordinates talk about seem to be quite different people since the elves he's heard about are ruthless to goblins. Our guy is certain that though his subordinates are eggheads, they don't lie. He's sure that the elves could have completely wiped out all the goblins in the forest, but the sheer number of goblins living in the forest can't just be out of kindness. An odd realization hits the princess, and she wonders why the clan mother ordered her to keep a few of them alive. Maybe she just wanted some of that good tonic. Lin Tian feels that the story doesn't add up, but he believes he'll get to the bottom of it when he leads the tribe to take the elf tribe that night. Our guy orders the captains to go devour the other 2 dead elves, while he deals with the princess, so the goblins gladly rush to go do their business. Lin focuses his gaze on Kasana, and it seems he has other plans for her. She suddenly realizes what his plans are, and she screams out that he should even dare to do it. Lin Tian starts to feel sympathetic, so he doesn't psyche. He forces himself on her, and the system congratulates him for reaching a level cap of +30. The system declares that since his aptitude has reached its maximum level, it has been converted to +150 HP, +110 defense, and +110 strength. He also acquired the elf skills Stealth and Night Vision. Meanwhile, in the elf tribe, one of the male elves declares to the Holy Mother that he can't continue anymore. She decides to let him go for the day, especially because the potion they have has already finished. She tells him it's so heartbreaking that the potion has finished. She wishes she had known because she would have captured more goblins the last time they went hunting. 3 elf men lie helpless on her bed, and they look like their life force has been taken out of them. One of the elf guards comes into the room, and the clan mother asks her if Kasana isn't back yet. He tells her that the princess left quite a while back and hasn't returned. He suggests they send out some men to go check on the princess, and mentions that it would be a good chance to kill some goblins and level up their warriors. The clan mother agrees, especially since more goblins mean more potions for her. While they're talking, they both hear a shrewd voice from outside that tells them that the princess won't be coming back tonight. The male guard quickly grabs his sword and swings into action, inquiring to know who made the statement. Our guy, who has acquired night vision, shoots several laced arrows from the dark at the male elves and the clan mother. The guard is easily taken out, and all his sword wielding is for nothing. The clan mother, on the other hand, easily catches the arrow and is surprised to see the Lin Tian along with an army of goblins. Our guy tells her that the princess is in his custody and will soon be having his little goblin babies. With a sly smile on his face, he tells her they're going to be family now, and she'll be his mother-in-law. The clan mother quickly grabs a nearby sword and demands to know what he has done to her beautiful daughter. Our guy tells her to take a guess, still having that smug look on his face. The clan mother rushes at him out of rage and threatens to kill him, but she simply trips beside him as he dodges her attack. He tells her that her tribe has been besieged and asks her to surrender obediently so he can consider treating her well. The clan mother, who is now on the ground, wonders why she suddenly collapsed. The Lin Tian tells her that the arrow he shot at her is laced with bodily fluids from goblins, which suddenly paralyzes female elves who come in contact with it, even though she has caught the arrow. The clan mother curses in anger, realizing she's been bested. Lin tells her he overheard her and her subordinates talking about upgrading their warriors and stimulating potions, so he comes to the conclusion that it's true that the elves have been using goblins this way. He jokes that he's sure they never expected the goblins to come back to settle the score. As Lin Tian lifts her chin using his knife, the clan mother wonders if this is the new goblin leader the princess was talking about. While they're talking, they overhear the shouts of soldiers screaming, "Kill them," from outside, and several shouts for help. The clan mother wonders what all the raucous is about, so our guy takes her to the window to have a better look. By the window, he tells her it's time they talk about her cooperating if she doesn't want things to get worse. The clan mother watches the goblins stab the male elves with spears, and she watches them cry out to her to save them, as the female elves beg her not to let the goblins take them away. For a big-mouthed race, they sure know how to cry when in trouble. The clan mother angrily demands to know what he's done to her tribe, as if the view he just gave her wasn't enough. She's still in shock that the goblins can easily overpower a higher race like the elves. Lin Tian just tells her that the goblins are stronger than every elf in their race, so they don't have the power to resist. He explains that the elves slaughtered the goblins when they had the power, so it's just necessary that the goblins reciprocate the favor when they get stronger. He advises her to just face reality so he doesn't have to kill her because to create stronger goblin warriors, he needs them alive. He also informs her that their fate after they help them achieve their cause of giving birth to stronger seeds depends on how well she behaves as a tribe's leader. The Holy Mother watches as the goblins stab the rest of the elf men and as they capture the other elf women. Many thoughts go through her mind since she has a hard decision to make. She eventually surrenders and tells him she'll do whatever he wants as long as he lets the little children live. She spells out that she's willing to bring her women to follow them and give birth to their children. Back in the enchanted forest, the princess screams out in pain when she realizes the Holy Mother has also been kidnapped. In tears, she asks the Holy Mother what they will do in the future. The Holy Mother apologizes for all that has happened and mentions that she underestimated the goblins and didn't expect them to attain strength greater than that of the elves. She tells the princess that all that's left of their clan are unarmed women and helpless children to preserve their bloodline. The clan mother confesses that their only way out now is to mate with the goblins so they keep them alive. The princess burst out in tears, realizing the gravity of the entire situation. One day, they're in their tribe, eating grapes and fighting over elf men. The next, they're in a cage, depending on the goblins to survive. Lin Tian soon comes into their cage and tells them they should all stay inside and wait to give birth. He promises to arrange for their meals every day. He simply warns them not to try anything stupid, so they don't have to blame him for being ruthless and killing them all. The Holy Mother simply tells him she understands. A mother's gotta do what a mother's gotta do. She makes one request, though, and asks if she can take care of their children since they're hers. Nearby, Goblin Yue is seen taking care of the little elf children that the warriors captured, along with the little goblin children she had for Lin Tian. Our guy wonders if the reason she keeps making requests and doing things because of her children is because of the elf attribute, boundless maternal love. While he's thinking, Yue breaks his line of thought and tells him that she can't take care of all the kids by herself. So, Lin Tian decides to let the Holy Mother join Yue to take care of the rest of the children. Lin Tian decides that the little elf children are also important since they can add significant strength to their tribe when they grow up. I just hope that isn't a code word for the fact that they'll mate with them, because that's just sick. Our guy decides to take a look at his stats after mating with the Holy Mother. The system window pops up again, congratulating him for gaining a qualification boost, which will be converted to 200 HP, 30 strength, and 30 defense. That's a lot of improvement. Lin Tian wonders if his qualification has been unlocked to the highest level since all his acquired values just get converted to attributes these days. He smiles slyly as he realizes that all he has to do to continue to increase his strength is to continue to mate with stronger individuals and make them give birth to his seed. He realizes that his current strength is already enough to crush Loader, but he decides to hold out until the elves give birth, and then find an opportunity to deal with him. Half a month later, we hear the noise of little goblin babies crying as the elf women give birth. One of the elf women screams in horror as the goblin child she gave birth to crawls towards her. She screams out, questioning if this is truly her child, and begs that they take it away from her. She tells them it's terrifying, and she doesn't want to have it. Poor goblin baby, having abandonment issues at a tender age. That's going to be a lot of money at goblin therapy. Hard life for a goblin, I guess. Nearby, Lin Tian asks Yue how many newborns they have so far, and she tells him they have about 40 or 30. Meanwhile, the princess screams out due to the pain of childbirth. She gushes out tears and seems to be in more pain than the rest of the elf women, which startles Lin Tian. The Holy Mother, who is breastfeeding her goblin baby, right next to her, tries to tell Kasana not to give up and asks her to keep pushing. Kasana, who is already tired of pushing, tells the Holy Mother she can no longer push. When Lin Tian and Yue come closer, the Holy Mother asks them to save her because it's her first time giving birth, and she seems to be on the brink of death. Lin Tian simply walks past her and tells Yue to spread the princess's legs. The Holy Mother asks him if he knows how to do this, surprised at how fast he swung into action. He tells her he knows a bit and proceeds to help the princess. Princess Kasana tells him she doesn't want him to help her, but he tells her to shut up and comply because they're also his children. Moments later, Lin, who probably must have had some medical experience in his past life, successfully delivers the baby. Yue tells him he's amazing and commends him for saving her. She's a perfect example of a supporting wife. She commends him for delivering another woman whom he impregnated. Lin Tian tells her it's not a big deal like men always do, but I'm sure he secretly cherishes the commendation. The princess just lies there paralyzed, as it seems she is carrying up to 3 goblin babies. While they all talk, they hear a loud scream from one of the elf women, telling a goblin, who is trying to have his way with her, to let her go. The goblins ignore her scream, and they just try to have their way with her again, right after she had just given birth. The woman keeps fighting, unwilling to give in. The struggle is interrupted when one of the goblins sustains a knife cut, which happens to be from our guy. The goblins move away in fear, and our guy reminds them that he had told them to leave the elf women alone until they're fully rested and have recovered before they make them breed. With a menacing look on his face, he tells them that whoever disobeys the order again will face the consequence of death, so the goblins bow down in submission. Lin Tian tells them that from now on, each elf must be given an extra portion of fruit, and the lower goblins affirm his orders. The Holy Mother, who had been watching the whole thing, remarks to Lin Tian that he really is different from the ordinary goblins. He simply tells her that it's the proper thing to do, as long as they behave themselves. Later, Lin Tian decides to simulate the system to see how things will play out over time. The system window pops up and tells him that the current situation is that he has conquered the elf tribe and impregnated all the female elves. Because of this, the female elves will give birth to goblins with stronger attributes than the average goblin. Seeing that the tribe is about to expand, the computer mentions that Lin Tian will decide to seek revenge on Loader. He will infiltrate Brighttown alone and successfully locate the whereabouts of the Blade Hero group that Loader is leading. The system gives him 3 options with 3 different points. The first option is to take action himself and attempt to kill Loader and the other, which has a rating of plus 150 points. The second option is to lead the goblins to seek revenge and massacre Brighttown, which has a rating of plus 30. The third option is to wait and see because he feels the timing is not right and he'd like to observe a while longer. This has a rating of plus 10. Lin Tian goes through the options and wonders how they were able to find them so quickly. He realizes that his present strength is higher than that of Loader, but his companion's strengths should not be underestimated. Based on the fact that he's strong enough to easily kill Loader, he decides to select option 1, which is to attack Loader on his own. The system quickly simulates his option and tells him he finally attacks Loader when he is alone. But, at the point of almost killing Loader, his master, the Sword Saint of the human race, named the Sword Saintess, appears. The Sword Saintess saves Loader, and he dies tragically under her sword. Soon after this, Loader and his group return to the capital and are never seen again. The system presents its summary, that there will be no chance to escape if he goes through that route, and tells him to be careful. The system rewards him with 30 points for choosing that route, and explains that the simulation will take 9 days in real life. Lin Tian is surprised to learn of the Sword Saintess's appearance. He wonders why such a powerful figure would appear in a place as small as Brighttown. He also realizes that he didn't expect Loader and his men to leave Brighttown. If they're going to be leaving soon, it's going to be difficult to find them again, so he decides he has to make his move quickly. Lin Tian looks over his shoulder and sees Yue giving the Holy Mother some apples. While watching, he gets a brilliant idea, so he decides to give it a try. He quickly walks to Goblin Yue and tells her that he needs to go into human territory for a few days. He tells her that the tribe's warriors listen to her the most after him, so he tells her to take over while he's away. Yue just exclaims, struck by the sudden news. The Holy Mother, on the other hand, asks him if he's crazy because it's certain that he'll be hunted and killed if he's ever discovered in human territory. He tells her that he knows, but he has a grudge against the human, so he has to seek revenge. A man's gotta do what a man's gotta do, even though it means his death. The Holy Mother tells him to wait and not be reckless. She tells him she can cast a stealth spell on him so he can't be detected by the humans, which makes Lin Tian slyly smile like he always does. It seems this was his plan all along, as he thinks to himself that this was exactly what he was waiting for her to say. He jokingly tells her that he didn't expect her to care about his safety, but she tells him that she's only afraid that the goblins will be more cruel to them if he dies. She casts the spell on him and tells him her children are all here, and their only chance of survival is if he returns alive. After the spell is cast, Lin Tian walks away towards the human kingdom. He thinks to himself that the Holy Mother really knows how to survive. Yue, who is now the leader of the tribe, simply screams out to him, telling him she'll take care of the tribe for him. Lin Tian waves at them one last time and tells them he'll see them later and he'll be back soon. Activities at Brighttown seem to be going on as usual, as the people go about their jolly business. They're soon interrupted by a couple of guards who go around for inspection. The guards look around meticulously for anything out of the ordinary. In a nearby dark alley, someone seems to watch them closely. That someone happens to be our MC, who looks angry by the number of patrol teams he keeps running into. He wonders why the town's security has suddenly become so strict. He wonders if this is because the Sword Saintess has already arrived, and hopes that is not the case. He is unsure of that because he's been gathering intel all day and no one has said anything about the Sword Saintess being around. Yet, the amount of security is alarming, which seems strange to him. As he walks through the town, he walks into an intersection and runs into a group that intrigues him. The group of people happen to be a team of adventurers that are ranking in Brighttown. The men in the group just chat with one another, totally oblivious to his presence. The teams present seem to be the Blade Hero team, which has the Platinum rank, the Boshi Hero team with the Silver rank, the Savior Hero team, also with a Silver rank in 3rd place, the Windstorm Hero team with a Bronze rank in 4th place, the Flame Hero team with a Bronze rank in 5th place, and lastly the Alchemy Hero team with a Bronze rank in 6th place. He wonders how the leader of the Blade Hero team, Loader, is ranking 1st, and wonders if he's improved again from the last time he saw him. Lin Tian quickly hurries onwards to find more clues, because as things are going, it seems his revenge plan might fail. At a nearby tavern in the city, The men enjoy themselves and drink to their hearts, closed by content. MC, who is passing by, overhears a voice that seems quite familiar to him. With a sly grin, he counts himself lucky to have run into Loader, his enemy, at this place of all places. As he opens the door, he finds Loader there chugging a large cup of rum in the midst of all his teammates from the Blade Hero team. At the table, one of the team members drunkenly tells the entire group how he was almost killed by a four-armed ape a while ago, but thankfully he was saved by Freya and Captain Loader just in the nick of time. Freya, who sits close by, simply passes along the compliment, declaring that Captain Loader is truly amazing because she couldn't have killed the four-armed ape alone. I wonder how massive Loader's ego is that he needs everyone at the table to massage it. A member of the Boshi team, who sits nearby, makes fun of the Blade Hero team for bragging about something as small as a four-armed ape. The guy who is sharing his testimony asks him what it is to him and tells him to get lost. The guy from the Boshi team starts to roll his sleeves, threatening his opponent not to think he won't whoop his ass because he's part of the Blade Hero team. The man who is sharing his testimony tells him to bring it on because he's not afraid. Loader just sits there, chugging another cup of rum as both men flaunt biceps at each other. Freya and the other team members, as well as the patrons of the tavern, just watch the men carefully to see what will happen. The tavern owner, who is indifferent about their shouting, simply informs them that the dragons on Dragon Island have entered their breeding season and have been kidnapping both livestock and their shepherds. He tells them not to cause trouble in the tavern, but to go slay the dragons if they feel they have some skills. MC, who sits nearby, watches the entire situation while he sips his rum and is startled to hear about dragons. The tavern owner continues his narration and says if the dragons attack Brighttown and the capital doesn't send reinforcements in time, the adventurers in town won't be able to fend off the dragon horde's attack. He confesses that Brighttown is about to face darkness. The adventurers who are enjoying their rum all turn to listen to him, worried about the information he just passed. Captain Loader, who has been silent since, tells everyone that it's just a few dragons and there's nothing to be afraid of. With a grin on his face, he tells them there's no need to hide the information he's been keeping, so he informs them that the Sword Saintess is already on her way here, which intrigues the crowd. He explains that the Sword Saintess is his master, and once she arrives, they'll join forces to slay the dragons, and there'll be no need for the capital to send reinforcements. The men all light up in bewilderment, surprised that Loader was able to summon the legendary Sword Saintess. Some of them think it's not likely, and he's just boasting, but another group believes that the arrival of the Sword Saintess is good news, because they don't have to be afraid of fighting against the dragons. One guy even says that if they succeed in their mission, Loader will become the hero of Brighttown. The captain, who now stands to make a public address, announces that he'll treat all of them to drinks as a way to celebrate the arrival of the Sword Saintess and the success of slaying the dragons in advance. He drops a small bag of coins to cover the bills to show he's serious, and the men start to furiously drink in excitement. Meanwhile, MC, who overhears the whole thing, stands up and quickly pays for his drink. He reasons to himself that he must seize this opportunity of having the dragons attack the town. Loader, who is facing his direction, is alerted by his quick exit. As Lin Tian reaches the door, Loader calls out to him and asks why he doesn't stay to have a few drinks with them. Lin Tian just looks over his shoulder and replies with a stern, "No." He tells Loader that there will be more opportunities in the future, with that sly grin on his face and that sneaky look in his eyes. The captain, along with another member of his team, who seems offended by MC's reply, watches him leave. Captain thinks his reply is strange, but he lets him leave without a confrontation. Shortly after, the town sets up a banner to welcome and celebrate the Sword Saintess's arrival to Brighttown. There are sparks in the air, and all the citizens are happy. Meanwhile, the captain goes into the temple to speak with the Sword Saintess. He calls her master and bows down in submission as he informs her that the dragons have been lingering around these days and are getting closer to the town. He adds that no one dares to let their animals go out to graze now, so it seems like the dragons might attack Brighttown soon. The Sword Saintess, who looks elegant in her armor, just asks him how the task she gave him is coming along. He tells her that the 10 dragon-slaying crossbows have been made according to the blueprints she provided and are being deployed at various high points around the town. She tells him to ensure they're stationed appropriately. Otherwise, none of them will be able to help when the dragons come, which will be a disgrace to her. Soon after, the Sword Saint goes out to address the people. Among the people, several people chatter about how noble she looks. One of the men wonders what kind of man could ever win her over, but another man tells him not to think about it, because not even the Emperor would think about making a move on her. While they're talking, dragons attack the town, so the Saintess tells Loader and her men to quickly disperse the men so they can get right to action. Loader, who had just been standing around in shock, quickly affirms her orders and starts to disperse the people so they don't get harmed. One of the dragons grabs a man who helplessly screams for help, while the others run in different directions in a commotion. It's not the dragon's fault for grabbing a man since they've all refused to let their animals graze. On the ground, the saintess announces that this dragon is a scout dragon. She explains that they only come to scan new territory, and it will attract the entire dragon horde for the real attack. She quickly orders Loader to bring his companions with her to the wall. Meanwhile, one of MC's captains rushes to inform him that the dragons are attacking the town. He also informs Lin Tian that there are many soldiers on the town wall, and asks what they should do. MC, who had already been alerted to the presence of the dragons, just tells him he knows and tells him they'll just stay there and enjoy the show. Behind our guy is the entire goblin army, equipped and ready to fight. They all grin at all the excitement, with their red bulb-like eyes, waiting for their chance. Soon after, the entire dragon horde ambushes the city and comes to ravage it. One of the dragons is shot through by the sword saintess, with the dragon-slaying crossbow that she had ordered them to design. The tool seems to be effective in killing the dragon, and their chances of saving Brighttown are increased. Captain Loader and Afreya, who are standing nearby, are intrigued by the effectiveness of the weapon. They watch in shock, with their mouths wide open. The sword saintess asks them if they know how to use the crossbows, and tells them to quickly get stationed at a crossbow and get ready to attack. The captain quickly affirms her orders and prepares to dispatch. Across the top of the wall, several men work tirelessly to load each crossbow in preparation for their next attack. After loading up, the sword saintess gives another loud order to fire, and all the men simultaneously fire their loads. The arrows pierce several of the dragons, and they fall to the ground like a pack of cards after sustaining terrible injuries. Some of the dragons dodge the attacks, hell-bent on knowing how people from Brighttown taste. Some of the men stationed at the crossbow are excited about how effective the weapon is. They call it amazing, and it looks like they're going to win this fight. While they talk, their attention is drawn quickly to a sudden change in the outlook of the sky. When they look closely, they realize that some big, strange figure is coming out of the sky. Suddenly, the men grab their heads due to the sudden tinge of pain that hits them. The new assailant seems to have some magical powers that disorient each soldier. The captain suddenly recognizes their new assailant, and signals to the sword saintess that they're up against the purple golden dragon mother. The dragon mother flies towards the wall, with several streaks of purple lightning following her. She makes a roar to assert her dominance, and the men look like ants in her presence, due to her sheer size. The men cower in fear and almost abandon their bows due to the ugly sight of the purple golden dragon mother. One of the men tells the others to quickly prepare to shoot, but his friend replies that she's way bigger than the other dragons, and the dragon-slaying crossbows can't possibly hurt her. While they deliberate on what to do, the dragon mother locks her gaze on the men standing right in front of her with their dragon-slaying crossbows. She suddenly creates a pool of fire in her mouth and shoots it toward the top of the wall. The impact of the hit makes the men run for cover, as it seems the wall is going to collapse. Nearby, they all hear the sword saintess announce that there's no need to panic. She tells them to leave the dragon mother to her. She tells everyone else to continue to defend the city and sticks her magic sword into the ground using an advanced sword technique. A blue circle emerges with blue radiant power being released, which demonstrates the power of the sword. Suddenly, a blue magic shield appears around the city, which stops the flames coming from the dragon mother from destroying the city. The dragon mother soon stops shooting fire at the town once she realizes that her attack is being warded off by the shield. On a nearby mountain, Lin Tian and the rest of the goblin army watch the fight from afar. Our guy thinks to himself that he didn't expect the shield to hold off the dragon mother's attacks. He runs an appraisal of their strengths and decides that it's also expected, because although the dragon mother has abnormal strength, the sword saintess is something else. The dragon mother has a level of 79, health of 4100, strength of 510, defense of 580, and an overall power of 2900. The sword saintess, on the other hand, is the real monster here. She's at level 80, has a health of 1700, strength of 690, defense of 700, and an overall power of 4000. As he watches the sword saintess leap toward the dragon mother to deliver several attacks, Lin Tian surmises that the sword saintess's strength is just too abnormal. Our guy thanks his stars that he's not in this fight because that would be a big problem. It's funny that just a while ago our guy was quibbling over an attack power of 200 and above when attacking the elves. He'll most likely be eviscerated if he steps into this battle. He realizes that the dragon mother is slightly weaker than the saintess, but it has the advantage of having higher health points. Our guy decides that the sword saintess can't possibly defeat the dragon mother in a short time. After watching the ongoing battle closely, along with his goblin army, Lin Tian decides that this is the perfect opportunity to take revenge against humanity as planned. He orders his goblin army to proceed into the city as they had planned. He orders that one team create a disturbance and another team lie in ambush. The goblin army, with red, bulb-like eyes and a keen desire for destruction, marched towards Brighttown to exact mayhem on the town. Meanwhile, the protective shield that the sword saintess had cast only seemed to have lasted long enough to deflect the Dragon Mother's attack. Several homes in the city are currently set on fire by the other dragons, while the sword saintess battles the Dragon Mother. Captain Loader exclaims that it's really difficult to deal with the flying dragons. He's glad to have the help of his master and decides that they can handle the rest since the dragons are just brute beasts. As he stabs one of the dragons, he boasts about how he's also now a dragon slayer, which is a skill set that the sword saintess has. While he's revealing his kill, one of the townspeople runs towards him and screams that goblins are invading the town, which startles the captain. Still, in battle with the dragons, the Blade Hero team is surprised to hear that goblins are invading the town at such a time. They believe it must be a joke since goblins are stupid, but not stupid enough to appear in such a fight since they're low-level creatures. The captain is startled by the voice of a nearby woman, who cries for help as she is chased by two goblins who are thirsty to have her. He curses upon realizing that they're facing a goblin invasion, right in the middle of a war with the dragons. He announces to his team that there aren't too many evil dragons left, so he tells Freya and another member of his team to hold them off, while he and the female swordsman, Yahello, go deal with the goblins. Yahello affirms his order, with a look of disdain in her eyes for goblins. They both chase one of the goblins, who makes a run for it upon seeing them advancing. Unbeknownst to them, several goblins are hiding in the sewers, and at several spots in the city, waiting for them to separate themselves from the rest of the team. The goblins underground give menacing cackles, with jagged teeth that look like old men's teeth, but are strong enough to break bones. In a split second, the goblins throw a net over Freya and shoot arrows at Loader, incapacitating him. As she's being dragged away, Freya cries out to the captain, who has been shot in the leg, to help her. The goblins, who have iron armor and carry iron tools, surround each of the warriors to attack them individually. The captain starts to curse, wondering why there are so many goblins. I would think he would ask why they're even carrying iron weapons, but oh well. Yahello, who has been stopped by a team of armed goblins, tries to fight them off and tells the captain she is coming to help. Meanwhile, the last member of the team of 4 tries to block the attack of the goblins who have also surrounded him. The situation looks terrible, as the men seem to be heavily outnumbered. While they're fighting, Lin Tian shows up on the scene, while the men are busy fighting the lower goblins. Suddenly the captain calls out to them to watch out because there's a new assailant behind them. They turn back just in time to receive deep slashes from MC's knife. Lin Tian just walks past them as he slashes them and spills their blood. Captain and Freya, who are now on the ground, watch the whole thing in horror since they had just lost 2 close teammates at once. Our guy simply walks towards them and tells them he didn't expect that they'd be caught so easily. The captain, who is now irate, screams out that he's going to kill them and calls them lowly goblins. Lin Tian just kicks him in the chin and knocks him out, telling him to read the situation carefully before making big statements. He orders the goblins to take Freya and Loader into the sewers, and orders the rest of them to follow him to the city wall to take out the remaining crossbowmen. The sword saintess, who is still dealing with the mother dragon, realizes that goblins are launching a surprise attack against the town. She wonders how goblins racked up the nerve to attack at such a time. The mother dragon, who transforms into a half-dragon, half-woman, mocks their present situation and tells the sword saintess that it looks like they have their hands pretty full. Noticing that she's distracted, the dragon mother calls her a witch and attempts to land a killing blow on her. The dragon mother makes fun of her inability to keep up and jokes that she'd like to see how much longer they can spend spilling dragon blood. Just as the dragon mother is about to hit her, the sword saintess uses her advanced sword skills and deflects the dragon mother's attack, creating a shield of sword strikes. The strikes land perfectly on the dragon mother, who screams out in pain and frustration. The sword saintess realizes that the dragon mother is about to run out of health points, and wonders if Loader and his team have been able to deal with the dragons and goblins who are attacking them. Suddenly, an explosion occurs on the town calls, throwing off the men and casting them to their doom. The sword saintess is alarmed by the explosion and wonders if the goblin problem hasn't been resolved yet. The dragon mother, who is standing nearby, prepares to launch her next attack. While the sword saintess is distracted, looking at the commotion occurring in the town, the dragon mother quickly transforms back into her dragon form and prepares for flight. As she flies off, the dragon mother threatens to come back after she has recovered from her wounds. The sword saintess, who was caught off guard, curses, realizing that the dragon mother had managed to escape. This means the battle is not over, but has just been postponed to another day. Out of anger, the sword saintess swears to wipe out the entire dragon race on Dragon Island once she's recovered. Meanwhile, the mayhem continues down below in the city, and several homes are seen on fire. The sword saintess soon comes down, and goblin heads start rolling. She piles up a few goblin corpses and wonders where Loader is, and why they can't take care of a few goblins. One of the adventurers, who lies injured from the attack, tells the sword saintess that goblins have captured Loader and Freya. Angry, she wonders how that's possible since goblins are nothing but lower-level creatures. One of the injured men tells her that these goblins are different from the usual ones they've encountered. They explain that the strength of these goblins is comparable to that of a race far greater than they are, and that's why even Loader couldn't defeat them. Their statement annoys the sword saintess, who is worried that her best men were overtaken by mere goblins. She pledges to go and slaughter all the goblins in the enchanted forest immediately to end this foolishness. One of the injured women, whose clothes have been torn, probably by ravaging goblins, begs the saintess to stay with them because they'll be unable to defend themselves if the dragons or goblins return to attack them. The rest of the citizens join the woman in her plea, but the saintess just ignores them, thinking about what the fate of Loader and Freya is. They all beg her that they are citizens of the temple and empire, and they ask that she stay with them to protect them. When they say that, the sword saintess thinks to herself that they're right about the fact that she has to protect the citizens of the temple and not the captured people. She thinks that Loader should blame himself for being too weak and being unable to deal with mere goblins, so she decides to ask the royal family for help first before she makes a move. Meanwhile, in the tribe, the elf women and the goblins go about their normal activities, and some are seen breastfeeding baby goblins. Another goblin nearby is seen trying to drag a female elf into a tent. Suddenly, one of the goblins announces that their leader is back, so they rush to go meet him. The goblins are glad to see that they've returned, and to learn that they were able to capture 2 humans. Some of the goblins wonder where they caught them from. It should be a no-brainer since they have announced that they're going to war against the human kingdom. They pulled them out of the sky, Karen. Loader and Freya, who are tied up and dragged by the goblin army, are surprised to see the goblin community and the elves they've taken captive. The goblins roughly throw Freya and Loader to the ground. Spikehead throws them against a rock while being tied up and tells them to be quiet. Loader, who disdains being treated like this by lowly goblins, growls at the goblins, probably thinking of 1,000 ways to kill it. Loader watches as Spikehead approaches one of the elf women to patronize her, but she moves away from him. One of the nearby goblins just smiles at Spikehead's pickup skills, probably hoping to get in on the action. Loader, who is watching the whole thing, is surprised to see that they have taken so many elves captive. Freya tells him that it seems to her that there might be a hero-tier goblin in this tribe, which would explain their unusual feats. Loader asks Freya if she's recovered a bit to know if she'll be able to use her magic. But she tells him that the toxin they used is quite potent, and it would take some time for her sacred constitution to eliminate its effects. MC, who is standing nearby, tells Freya that he didn't expect the poison to lose its effect so soon, and he commends Freya for her strong recovery speed. His statement startles Freya, who didn't know he was listening to them. Meanwhile, Spikehead comes to subdue Loader, who angrily protests against our guy. When Lin Tian lays a hand on Freya's thighs, she demands to know how he knows her name and asks him what he's attempting to do, possibly trying to give her a massage. MC, who just gives a sly grin, asks her if she doesn't know what he wants to do. He digs his claws into her legs, and Freya screams out loud in pain. The captain, who is nearby, attempts to defend Freya, but the goblins nearby subdue him. Eventually, he shouts at Lin Tian and tells him to stop doing that. One of the goblin captains lands a clean blow on Loader's chin, telling him not to dare raise his voice at the boss. Loader, who realizes he's been bested, asks Lin Tian if he realizes the consequence of capturing them. He tells him that the strength of the sword saintess can wipe out his entire tribe in one strike. MC, who looks unperturbed, tells her that the sword saintess is also his prey, but her time hasn't come yet. He informs the captain that, besides, he has sent someone to cover up their tracks, so the Saint Swordess won't even be able to find their location even if she wants to. Lin Tian immediately instructs one of the captains of the Goblin, Berserker, who had landed a punch on Loader's chin, to take all the second-generation goblins into the forest to kill more monsters and bring them back. Berserker quickly affirms his orders and tells him to leave it to him. Our guy realizes that with such a big attack, the humans won't let the existence of the goblins slide, so he has to complete the evolution process before they find them. Lin Tian steps on the captain's chest to interrogate him. He tells him to cooperate by answering his questions, or he can't promise that he'll get to keep all his body parts. Our guy asks the captain if they're fond of secretly capturing goblins and inflicting torture on them, referencing what they did to him in his past life. The captain, who now begins to curse, asks him what nonsense he's talking about. Lin Tian starkly tells him that he took too long to answer, so he takes a clean cut of the captain's left ear with one swing of his knife. The captain grabs his bleeding ear and cries out due to the pain, cursing at Lin Tian and calling him a damn goblin. With his ear now on the ground, the captain tells him that everything they've done they do to protect the human race. He tells him that it's their duty to defeat monsters, and the goblins are one of them. Lin Tian finds it hard to swallow that they're doing it for the human race, so he tells him that he thinks it's more about constantly elevating the status of their so-called hero party. Lin Tian recalls how they had killed the human woman he was trying to protect in his last life. So he affirms that it's much easier for the Blade Hero Party to kill the captured humans, along with the monsters, than to rescue them alive. He angrily asks the captain how much blood debt he has accrued to complete his missions in the name of being righteous. The captain and Freya are suddenly startled by his allegations, wondering how this goblin knows so much about them. MC, who now has an evil look on his face, tells them the conversation is over. He tells them, unlike them, who pretend to be righteous, he doesn't have to pretend, because he's an inherently evil monster. He tells them he's going to teach them a lesson, and he goes toward Freya to hurt her. The captain screams at him not to hurt Freya, but Freya, who is being manhandled, simply drools from all the hurting that Lin Tian is giving her. She struggles to speak and makes a blur of words, trying to tell the captain to help her. The captain screams at Lin Tian to stop, calling him a beast, but Freya, who is just sweating and tearing up as her eyeballs roll upwards, weakly tells him to stop. The captain, who is angry to witness the scene, continually shouts at Lin Tian to stop, so the captains of the goblins come to subdue him and tie him up. Lin Tian reminds Freya of the words she told him while torturing him in his past life, telling her that the lesson has just begun. Freya, who is unable to say a word, just sweats profusely as she continues to tear up. The MC, who is now done with her, tells her he wonders if Loader, who enjoys watching what the goblins will do to her. As our guy steps backward, he lets the other goblins have a go at Freya. The goblins, who all have evil expressions on their faces, gladly walk toward Freya to carry out their devious plan and satisfy their dark desires. The captain watches in amazement as the goblins grab Freya, who now lies on the ground helpless, and attempt to have their way with her. He screams out her name but gets no response. The next day, the goblin who is guarding the humans calls one of his brothers to come take up his shift. The other guy tells the new goblin that the boss had said not to kill Freya, so he warns him to keep her alive. The new goblin guard just gives a shrewd laugh. He tells the other goblin he won't kill her and tells him not to worry. Freya, who now looks battered and beaten up, just remains tied up and looks exhausted. Close by, the captain tries to tell her to hang on so the goblins don't get the upper hand. She assures the captain that she's fine and she'll hold up. One of the goblins who is close by steps on the captain's head and tells him to shut his pothole. Meanwhile, the clan mother, who sits nearby with the princess, while she's breastfeeding a baby goblin, tells the princess she thinks Lin Tian has a grudge against the humans, judging by how they're being treated. The princess agrees that the humans have it worse than they do since they still have fruits to eat. Goblin Yue, who comes in with some fruits, while the baby goblins try to play with her, mentions that she has heard Lin Tian mention his grudge against the humans before, and agrees that it must be true. The clan mother mentions that our guy always keeps his word and never forgets a grudge, which makes him the most unique goblin she's ever seen. I think she has a crush on him or something. The clan mother starts to fantasize about MC and starts to blush, so the princess jokingly comments that she sees that the clan mother has become fond of him. Soon, Spikehead announces that the second-generation goblins, who are the ones the elves gave birth to, have returned from their hunting. Our guy is surprised, so he asks why they're back so early from hunting monsters. The second generation of goblins arrives with large catches of animals on their shoulders and their carriages. One of the second-generation goblins happily tells the boss that they've returned. Looking at his rating, this goblin is in level 33 and has a warrior class, unlike the others, which means he has significantly increased offense and defense. He also has an HP of 470, a strength of 142, a defense of 68, and an overall power of 500. Our guy thinks to himself that, as expected, the second-generation goblins have already broken through level 30 and have evolved into high-tier species. He realizes that their stats are almost catching up to his. Lin Tian asks them why they came back so early today and asks how their hunt went. The lead second-generation goblin tells him that they've wiped out all the nearby monsters, so they had to go look in the west side of the forest. He also informs the boss that they ran into several high-tier goblins slaughtering other goblin tribes. This information startles the MC, so he asks which tribe it was. One of the other second-generation goblins named Tien tells him that they're known as the Bloodfang tribe, and they're mostly high-tier goblins. He further explains that while they were splitting up to find the monsters, they discovered that several goblin tribes had been attacked, and they all bore the mark of the Bloodfang tribe. The information piques our guy's interest as the thought of a tribe full of high-tier goblins fascinates him. With a sly smile on his face, he mentions that they could create stronger third-generation goblins if they capture their leaders, which will increase their chances of surviving the efforts of the humans to exterminate them. The captain, who is blindfolded and tied nearby with one ear, laughs at MC, calling him foolish for dreaming when the tribe is about to be annihilated. He tells them that no matter how powerful the goblins get, they're still going to be defeated by the knights, so he tells them to wait and see. MC, who is now irritated by his presence, mentions that he almost forgot about his existence since he's been so quiet. Lin Tian switches to that evil look he always has when he wants to do something terrible, and tells the other goblins, who didn't get to have fun the last time, to have their way with the captain. The captain just cries out in horror, realizing what's going to happen to him, as 3 thirsty-looking goblins surround him. He demands to know what they're planning to do, as everyone else does. But it's too late for him. One of the goblins, who is finally happy to get his turn, mentions that even male humans have such tender and soft skin, as he starts to ravage the captain. The captain, who is now sweating profusely, never having witnessed such a fearful thing in his life, possibly wishing for death more than this, starts to curse. He tells them they're all monsters, and the knights will exterminate their race. Soon after, the goblins overpower the captain and do their business. Ifreya, who is chained nearby, just keeps quiet and tries her best to ignore his screams. Several hours later, the captain is seen almost lifeless on the ground, and he looks like a truck had hit him. Well, it's the goblin truck. All the goblins soon gather to roast some of the meat from the hunt and dance, while Lin Tian sits down with the princess and Yue. Yue asks him if he plans to attack the Bloodfang tribe next, so he tells her that they have to do that to be the strongest. He tells her that they will not only be attacking them, but they will capture their leader. He tells them he's even come up with a new name for the tribe. He declares that from now on the tribe will be called the Tian Kuang tribe, which is derived from his name, Lin Tian. The second-generation goblins, who are seen enjoying bottles of rum, rejoice over the boss's declaration and call him mighty. The other goblins soon join in and rejoice over the fact that their tribe now has a name. They all shout the name in unison as they begin to celebrate. Yue, who is worried due to the strength of the Bloodfang tribe, asks him how they're going to capture the tribe's leader since they've wiped out so many tribes. Lin just tells her to calm down and tells her he has confidence. He looks at Ifreya and tells her that he has a trump card that he hasn't used yet. The next day, the boss heads into the forest and enjoys the view of the demonic forest from where he's standing. It turns out that he's scouting the residents of the Bloodfang tribe, so he decides to do an appraisal of their actual strength. He spots the Bloodfang goblins going about their usual business and notices that there are indeed quite a few high-tier goblins, but they should all be manageable. While he's watching, he notices that the goblins suddenly become scared, and he notices that their leader is approaching. His face lights up when he finally sees the leader of the Bloodfang tribe. The reason he's so happy is that the leader of the tribe is a hero-class goblin. As a hero class, he's in level 50, has a class of high-rank warrior, has an HP of 700, a strength of 239, a defense of 14, and an overall power of 900. Our guy realizes that the leader doesn't seem all that powerful with a total combat power of 900. He reasons that a dozen or so goblin warriors should be able to handle it. The only issue is that the leader won't go without a fight, so they won't be able to capture him without a fight. He also realizes that their poison might be of little use to the Bloodfang goblins since they're quite large. He decides that since the paralytic poison won't work on them, he'll have to think of another way. He recalls the imprisonment spell that Ifreya used to keep him in one spot while she was torturing him in his previous life, and reasons that it would be cool if he's able to use that same spell on the Bloodfang leader. With that sly grin on his face, he decides that it's time to go see Ifreya. Back in the Goblin tribe, things seem to be going well. Meanwhile, close to where the humans are being captured, Spikehead tells the boss that they have completed his orders according to how he stated them, but he jokingly mentions that he thinks Ifreya is dying. It appears that they've been feeding her with some sort of intoxicating substance, and Ifreya now lies, helpless on the ground. Lin Tian tells Spikehead he did well and dismisses him, but he wonders what state Ifreya is in. Ifreya, who now makes blurry words, asks them to kill her so she can atone for her sins in the presence of her lord. Lin Tian simply walks towards her and uses a hot towel to tend to her wounds. Ifreya, who likes the warmth of the towel, enjoys the feeling, but she soon freaks out when she realizes the one attending to her is Lin. She jerks her hands away from him and tells him to stay away from her. She calls him a demon and informs him that she's going crazy because she's in so much pain. Out of nowhere, Lin Tian gives Ifreya a startling slap, which dazzles her. He also reaches behind her and immediately draws her closer to hug her. It's a little tough-loving. He tells her punishment is over, while still hugging her, and Ifreya just remains in his arms, still startled. With tears in her eyes, she asks him if he's telling the truth. He tells her that he keeps his word, but his only condition is that she must choose to have faith, which makes her wonder what faith he's talking about. She watches him with tears in her eyes, and he tells her that she can either choose to believe in God or choose to trust him and become her pet, which spares her from the daily torment. He calmly says this while petting her head to calm her down. If Freya, who seems to now be broken, doesn't say a word. Suddenly, she starts to lick his hands, and he takes that as a sign of submission. Our hero holds up Freya, who kneels to him and tells her that's a good response. He tells her that from now on, he's her only master, and he'll call her his little B word. Freya simply makes a woof sound and calls him master. Suddenly, Lin Tian carries Freya in his arms. He tells her to come with him and carries her towards a warm bath. After he gets rid of her underwear and chains, he puts her in the soothing bath and starts to clean her up. Freya, who seems not to be right in the head anymore, tells him he treats her so well. She says she's willing to give him everything. He just continues to tend to her. Freya seems to be enjoying all the attention and the warmth of the bath. He replies to her by telling her that it's perfect and that she'd like to give him everything. He tells her he wants to see how to use the skill Holy Light Cage, which he recalls that she had used to trap him in his previous life. She repeats the word Holy Light Cage and asks him what it is, calling him master. Our guy presents a book with spells that he had obtained from the elves and points her to the spell for the Holy Light Cage. Since she's a magician and can understand spells, she quickly picks up the writing and starts to cast the spell. A bright golden cage suddenly appears out of nowhere, with a crucifix as its seal. MC, who is standing nearby, is intrigued by the sight of the cage, so he commends Freya for a job well done. Soon enough, Lin Tian and Freya walk together, past the iron cage where the captain is kept. The captain is surprised to see Freya moving around. He quickly asks her if she's fully recovered. He tells her to quickly kill our guy and use her magic to restore his body before Lin Tian can make a move. Lin Tian simply retorts to the captain and asks if he can't see that she is now willingly submitted to him. Freya just silently stands there as Lin Tian talks, and the captain can't stop his jaw from hitting the floor upon hearing MC's words. The captain refuses to accept and wonders how the daughter of the leader of the Holy Order can be tamed by goblins. Freya just kneels close to her master and starts to rub on him like a dog. Lin Tian asks her to tell him if she had willingly submitted or not, so Freya responds that she did it voluntarily, calling him master. Those words bring a sense of hopelessness upon Loder, who realizes that he's lost Freya. In his cage, he looks down but smugly says that MC's action will lead to the extinction of the goblin race from the world. He gives a maniacal laugh and further mentions that the only purpose of the goblins' existence is to be slaughtered by humans. As Freya and Lin Tian leave, he screams out that the Holy Church will wipe them out. Lin Tian honestly thinks to himself that he didn't expect Freya to be so completely submitted. He thanks the captain for revealing such vital information and looks for a way to reward him, so he asks the goblins not to let the captain rest for the next few days. Berserker, who is standing nearby with a smile on his face, prepares his whip and tells the boss to leave it to him. Poor captain. Lin Tian quickly focuses on Freya and tells her that it's time for them to focus on the business at hand. He holds her by the hand and leads her away so they can deal with the Bloodfang tribe. Meanwhile, in the Bloodfang tribe, things seem to be going on as usual. As we take a closer look, one of the captains of the Bloodfang tribe, who looks like a priest, approaches the leader, along with many other Bloodfang goblins, to tell him that everything is ready. The leader, who is pleased to hear the news, tells them that they will attack the southern tribes today. To pump the people up, he announces that they'll capture the elves and have fun with them, and all the goblins go crazy, hailing the majesty of the boss. It seems women and meat are the only two things you can use to motivate a goblin crowd. While they're celebrating, one of the Bloodfang guards hurriedly approaches the boss to call his attention to something, which irritates him. The guard announces that a strange goblin has barged into the tribe and is demanding the boss, and this surprises the leader of the Bloodfang tribe. The Bloodfang leader wonders if it's a low-level goblin, so he decides to go see his visitor. Upon reaching there, it turns out to be MC, who had come to the Bloodfang tribe all on his own. He tells the leader that he knows he's a hero-class monster who has intelligence almost as great as that of the humans, so he has come to talk to him. The Bloodfang leader recognizes that his structure is human-like, and his manner of speech is not so much like a goblin, so he asks him if he's a mutant. Our guy tells him that he's not a mutant, but he's just slightly smarter than normal goblins. He makes the statement looking so expressionless that the high-tier and low-level goblins who surround him look evidently angry. They look like they're going to pounce on him any moment from now. To make matters worse, Lin Tian just cuts the bull and tells them he's the leader of the southern tribe, and he has come to take their leader's head as if it's an Amazon delivery he ordered. Still standing in their midst, he tells them that the rest of them have two options, which are to either submit to him or choose death right there. The entire tribe becomes tense, and they all seem to be waiting for the order of their boss to rip Lin Tian limb from limb. The leader is simply shocked to know he's the infamous leader of the southern tribe who keeps elves captive, whom he had planned to capture. Lin Tian continues his speech and tells the Bloodfang leader that he has good genes, so he asks him to come with him. The nerve on this guy. The Bloodfang leader just blurts out that he is a fool. In the twinkle of an eye, the Bloodfang leader reaches out and catches MC's head, since he's much larger in size, telling him to shut his pothole. The Bloodfang leader tells him that he didn't expect him to come by himself, which makes the job easier for him. The leader promises to kill him, as well as the other goblins, so he can have the elves and humans for himself. The other goblins from the Bloodfang tribe who are around hail the boss and ask him to crush MC's head. MC, who just remains in the leader's hands without moving a muscle, tells the leader that, as he had expected, there's no further reason to discuss. His statement annoys the leader, who tells him he's only lucky that he plans to keep him alive, so there's no need to go further and destroy him. While the leader is talking, Lin Tian uses his weapon and makes a straight slash, which causes the Bloodfang leader to let out a shriek due to pain. Soon enough, the Bloodfang leader's hand is seen lying on the ground, and the members of the tribe look at it with horror. The leader realizes that he's lost the upper hand, so to say, pun intended. He quickly orders his men to kill the MC. The Bloodfang priest rallies the other warriors to kill our guy to avenge their boss, but Lin Tian just stands in their midst, unperturbed. Our guy raises his hands and tells an invisible figure to come out. Suddenly a sword pierces the Bloodfang priest from behind. As he's about to die, he wonders out loud how his assailant could be so quiet, but the second-generation goblin from the southern tribe happens to have acquired the invisibility skill from one of his preys. Out of nowhere, Berserker comes forth and proudly announces that it's because they have another special skill called Silent Steps, which allows the user to move around without making noise. Lin Tian orders the rest of the goblin warriors to come out and tells them to kill the entire Bloodfang tribe. The goblin captains recount the orders and announce that the boss has ordered that they take out all of the Bloodfang tribe. Out of nowhere, hundreds of goblins who had also been using the Silent Steps skill show up and start to take out the goblins using their weapons, and the Bloodfang leader is shocked when they appear. The Bloodfang leader watches MC, who just stands in front of him with his usual smug smile as all the mayhem goes on, and decides that this was MC's plan all along. The Bloodfang leader decides that the southern leader had approached them in the guise of negotiation to get them to drop their guard. He made them put all their attention on him, which didn't allow them to notice the silent army that crept into their territory. The leader decides that the best option for him is to make a run for it, and he decides that he's too strong for anyone to be able to stop him if he runs. Taking a final look at MC, he loudly promises to kill him even if he's going to escape, so he launches at him with a killer punch with his remaining good arm. MC, who just stands there unperturbed, doesn't move out of the way of the incoming punch but only calls out Ifreya's name. Ifreya, who's standing nearby, recognizes her cue and summons the Holy Light Cage. The light cage envelops the Bloodfang leader, to his shock. He quickly understands that it's a light attribute spell, but he wonders how since a goblin can't cast light spells. He glares at the Lin Tian with eyes that are almost human, but are filled with boiling rage, hoping to get a chance to land an attack on him. Meanwhile, Ifreya kneels close to Lin Tian and calls him master, while he pets her head. At this point, her transformation is so quick that I believe she was secretly a submissive who had been waiting to break free from the shackles of her strong warrior life. Lin Tian commends her for being a good dog and tells her she's gotten stronger ever since she went dark. He tells her to go pet her reward, and Ifreya just excitedly thanks him, calling him master, over and over. The Bloodfang leader, who is now trapped with chains made out of light magic, calls Lin Tian a scum. MC, who just looks away from him, laughs and asks him to obediently become his heroic breeding goblin. I wonder what'll happen if he doesn't. It'll be funny if the Lin Tian takes him through the same horrific training and this big guy becomes a submissive himself. Back at home in the Quang tribe, everything seems to be peaceful, and folks are going on about their normal lives. In one of the dungeons, the Bloodfang leader is seen heavily chained to a rock, and he can't move an inch. The Lin Tian breathes a sigh of relief from all the stress it took to subdue the Bloodfang leader. He's happy that all the hard work is done and there's no longer any threat, as he cleans his blood-stained knife, which he had just used to convince the leader to sit still so he can tie him up. Nearby, Captain Loader, who is in prison, wonders how the tribe was able to capture a hero-class goblin. Lin Tian tells Goblin Yue that the task of artificial insemination can be handled by the other goblins, but he asks her to just keep an eye on them. Goblin Yue, who is standing nearby with the clan mother, who seems to be ogling the MC, enthusiastically agrees to do so. The Lin Tian also leaves Ifreya in Yue's care, who seems to have a crazy look in her eyes, and she obediently holds on to Yue. Lin Tian asks Ifreya to pay attention to Yue's words, and Yue promises to handle her well. Our guy tells the clan mother that he wants her to help him get dressed later because he wants to go see a friend. By getting dressed, he's referring to using her elf magic to conceal his identity as usual. Surprised, the clan mother just asks him if he had indeed said he wants to go see a friend, to ensure she heard him correctly. The The Lin Tian doesn't explain much but just reiterates that he's indeed going to see a friend, with a slight smile on his face. To give more context, the Lin Tian just grins widely and tells her it's a very important friend. Later on, our guy reasons to himself that based on what the captain had said, he's sure that human reinforcement will reach Brighttown soon. He reasons that their present capacity can handle the knights, but an encounter with the sword saintess spells their doom. He also considers the fact that it'll take some time to complete the breeding of the hero-class goblins, so he needs a strong ally to help stall the sword saintess. Lin Tian finally decides that he needs to pay a visit to Dragon Island to meet the mother of the purple gold dragons. It's a great idea, but the only issue is that Dragon Island is at least 100 kilometers away from where they are, so it's pointless going there. He decides the best way to get to Dragon Island is to summon a dragon here, so he kills 2 large monsters and spills its blood right by the water. A few moments pass, and the Lin Tian hopes that the scent of the monster's blood is enough to attract any close dragon who's looking for a quick meal. True to his word, one of the dragons soon appears and spots the tasty meal by the water. Lin Tian quickly hides in a space he had created in one of the monster's stomachs, happy that everything is going on as planned. The dragon easily lifts the dead beasts off the ground, and Lin Tian is seen hanging on in the dead animal's stomach. When the dragon begins to fly, Lin Tian secretly celebrates that his plan is successful, so he decides to enjoy the first-class flight to Dragon Island. After a long flight with no turbulence or bad weather, they get to their destination. Upon reaching a suitable spot, the dragon drops the animals through a hole on top of a large rock. The dead beasts fall through the opening and land in a cave that has been made inside the rock, right on top of a heap of bones that used to be succulent beasts themselves. When Lin Tian makes his way out of the animal's stomach, he confirms his suspicions that the dragons weren't just hunting for themselves, but for someone else. When Lin Tian fully gets out of the animals inside, he dusts himself off and decides that it's time to track down the dragon mother, but his planning is stopped by a loud voice from behind him. The purple dragon mother, who is in her dragon form, mentions that it seems that there's something weird mixed in with the food. She looks at him with large reptile eyes that are bigger than his entire body size, and this startles MC, who didn't realize she's been there the whole time. After taking a closer look, the dragon mother recognizes him as the goblin who had attacked Brighttown, which allowed her to escape. She asks him what's he doing sneaking into her territory. She asks him if he doesn't think she'd eat him, and another menacing dragon comes to join her. Lin Tian quickly tells her to wait and informs her that he has come to discuss cooperation with her. The dragon mother thinks it's peculiar that a mere goblin would come to discuss cooperation with her. Nonetheless, she honors his request and transforms into a demi-human, as she had done during the battle in Brighttown. She tells him she's willing to help him because he had helped her in her last battle, and transforms into a large demi-human that towers over him. The dragon mother tells him she hopes he can satisfy her so she doesn't have to eat him. Lin Tian tells her he knows that she seeks revenge against the sword saintess, so he suggests that they join forces, and he tells her she can consider it a favor for also helping him escape during the raid in the last battle. His words shock the purple dragon mother, who wonders the kind of nerve such a lowly creature can have to target the sword saintess, and confesses that he has piqued her interest a little bit. She asks him how he plans to bring down the wretch known as the sword saintess. Our guy just tells her he needs one simple thing from her, which is to occasionally send her dragon soldiers to harass Brighttown. The dragon mother wonders what role mere goblins are going to play in the plan, seeing that the sword saintess is much stronger. She asks him what his plan is, but he doesn't say anything. When she moves closer and raises his chin upwards with one of her fangs, she informs him that with an enemy as strong as the sword saintess, confrontation will do little good. Lin Tian tells her that the plan is to attack her mind because breaking her spirit is the only way to weaken her. After he explains the plan, the dragon mother laughs deeply and agrees with him. She mentions that it's her perfect desire to use the goblins to do some killing without having to sacrifice members of her tribe. When Lin Tian asks if they can consider their deal sealed, she tells him that is sure. But she soon slowly wraps her large palm around his face to get a closer look at him, and seductively inches closer to him. MC, who just stands there, watches her claws around his head but doesn't move an inch. The purple mother dragon tells him she could have never figured out that a goblin could be so clever, and tells him she likes him the more she gets to look at him. Looking utterly seductive, she asks him if he'd like to get a little reward from her, if you know what I mean. Emps, who just remains in her arms, thinks about how feisty the female dragons can become during their breeding season. The purple dragon mother eventually decides that our guy's little body is not worthy of her attention, so she decides to give him another reward for now. For now, which means things can happen in the future. The dragon mother looks around and wonders which she should choose as his reward. It's funny how she's pimping out her dragons so easily. Meanwhile, things at Tianquang tribe, which is our guy's tribe, are going smoothly. Captain Loader is tied to a cross and put under the hot sun, while some goblins stand guard to ensure he doesn't do anything funny. Heavily pregnant elves also walk around like it's nobody's business. The captain thinks to himself that it's been so long and wonders why the knights haven't come to save him. The simple answer is that maybe he overestimated his worth. He thinks to himself that he's going to lose his mind if he remains there much longer, and decides that he needs to escape. The only issue is that there are goblins in every inch of that camp, so his chances of escaping are close to nil. The captain has a great idea and concludes that he can escape if he gets to higher ground since goblins are quite short. His thinking is soon interrupted by the presence of the dragon, who flies towards the tribe. The captain suddenly starts to scream that a wyvern, which is another name for these types of dragons, is around. He begs them to let him go because he's not ready to be burned by dragonfire. Poor guy probably wants to marry and have kids first. While the captain screams, the goblins just ignore him and alert themselves so they can be on guard. The second generation soon takes formation to fight against the dragon, wondering why it has come to their tribe. While they all look, they realize that someone happens to be on the dragon. The dragon soon lands as the entire tribe watches intently to see what will happen. The person on the dragon comes down, and it turns out to be the boss, who gladly announces that he's back. The red dragon that he came with just stands next to him, watching the people of the tribe. The goblins nearby happily announce to the others that it's the boss, and the entire tribe erupts in joy. Lin Tian pets the dragon and tells her to rest for a while and not to wander around, and the dragon seems to enjoy it. When the boss approaches the people, they all start to praise him, and they chant that the boss lives long. Even Yue joins in, excited to see him. The captain, who had almost pooped his pants a few minutes ago, looks at Lin Tian and wonders if he's truly a goblin. He makes a silent prayer and hopes the night order quickly comes to rescue him. Meanwhile, things in Brighttown seem to have returned to normal, and the citizens seem to have recovered from the raid that just happened a while ago. In the streets, several horses and men in exquisite armor and regalia are seen. It turns out to be the Royal Knight Order, who have come to the town based on the sword saintess's request for reinforcement. When the knights reach their destination, they come down from their horses to make obeisance to the sword saintess. She tells them to get up because time is running out and there is no need for formalities. She urges them to quickly prepare the rescue plan so they can rescue their men from the goblins. At the Tianquang tribe, Lin Tian runs the Goblin Life Simulator system to see how things will go from here onwards. The system declares the current plot, which is creating the third generation of goblins through artificial insemination from the Bloodfang leader. The system shows that by ambushing Brighttown to capture the humans, and by ambushing the Bloodfang tribe, he has achieved remarkable results. He has led Goblin Yue and Afreya to continue to grind levels in the Enchanted Forest, to counter the Sword Saintess and the human royal family. The system forecasts that in a month's time, Goblin Yue will have a level of 60, he will have a level of 50, and Afreya will have a level of 45. Seeing that he will attain a level of only 50, his strength will still be insufficient, so the system gives him 3 options. The first option is to keep grinding monsters in the forest, which will give you 1 point. The second option is to find a way to capture prisoners and cultivate more goblins, which will give him plus 110 points. The third option is to speed up the leveling process and jump directly to 1 month later, which will give him plus 120 points. Lin Tian considers his option and wonders if option 3 will work. He realizes that with the system's powers, he can jump to a month from now, and this will still delay the ambush from the Sword Saintess in their timeline. In layman's words, the series of activities that will occur in the tribe will be pushed into a month further, but time itself will not change, so every other person in the world won't be affected. Lin Tian decides to select the third option to skip the waiting period. The system initiates the time acceleration sequence. Before it begins, it declares its summary as usual and says that the Enchanted Forest can no longer provide experience for him and his clan. Blue streaks of light begin to appear around MC, which surprises him and he wonders what's going on. In a few minutes, that system declares that the simulation of life is complete and the time progression is now 1 month. Our guy is shocked by how everything happened and is surprised to find they have moved forward 1 month in life progression. He finds himself on a bed and wonders if this is how it feels to skip time because his body seems to be reacting strangely to it. The system congratulates him for reaching level 50. This achievement grants him health points of 850, a strength of 270, a defense of 300, and an overall strength of 1000. Lin Tian notices that his attributes have increased quite a bit, but his overall strength hasn't changed all that much. While he ponders why this may have happened, he hears a noise outside as people call on him. Goblin Yue soon opens the door to tell him that something wrong has happened because many of the newborn goblins are stillborn. Outside, Lin Tian and Yue find several elf women looking dejected as they look down on their lifeless goblin babies. The women wonder how things went wrong because they had carried the babies like the few other times they bred. MC, who is still shocked, wonders if something has gone wrong in the breeding process. He collapses on the ground and wonders what has happened. The clan mother, who is crouched nearby, asks him if he knows what happened to the babies. Our guy tells her that he doesn't know, but only 3 babies are alive now, and they're very weak. As they contemplate, they hear a loud laugh of mockery, which happens to be coming from Captain Loader, who is still tied to a cross. The captain calls them foolish goblins, wondering if they believe they can breed a stronger generation. Lin Tian looks in his direction and asks why he had said that. The captain, who still can't contain his laugh, tells them that the higher the rank of the goblin, the harder it is for them to stay alive. While still laughing, he makes fun of Lin Tian for his idea of thinking that he can rule the world through reproduction, calling him a fool. Lin Tian just looks at him expressionless, while Berserker stands nearby, hoping that he'd get a chance to pound the captain's head in with his bat. Lin Tian thanks the captain for the information and tells him he'll find a way to appreciate him. The boss tells Berserker, who is standing nearby, that from now on, the captain belongs to him. He reminds him not to kill him while they're playing, and Berserker, who is glad to hear the news, thanks the boss for his new toy. The captain, who still has a loud mouth, screams at Mick, telling him he's ruthless, and he won't let him off the hook even if he becomes a ghost. Lin Tian just walks away, while Berserker brings the captain down so they can play. Our guy reasons to himself that it's too late now to breed new hero species, but they're in desperate need of a large number of hero goblins right about now. He considers that their chance of victory against the Sword Saintess and her knights is slim if they can't find a way to upgrade the goblins. While he ponders, the red dragon he returned with appears next to him, with a dark look in her eyes as if she has some nasty intentions. She comes close to him, and her sudden closeness startles MC. The boss starts to pet her and wonders what suddenly entered into her. He realizes she's in heat, so he decides that a female dragon going into heat and transforming into a demi-human would be a special situation, which may be what they need right about now. While he pets her, the red dragon starts to transform into a beautiful demi-human. She transforms into a beautiful red-headed demi-human and blushes as she casts his gaze on him. Lin Tian realizes that this is a special case and wonders if this is the very reason the dragon mother sent her to follow him. When she approaches him, our guy chuckles, and sweat starts to form on his face, as he seems to be the prey in this hunt. She quickly leaps over him, and he falls on his back, giving her a vantage point. She proceeds to climb on top of him, and they begin their action. After she finishes, the system window opens, and the system congratulates our guy for unlocking a new achievement and getting promoted. His new stats are an HP of 1500, a strength of 520, and a defense of 1200. After Lin Tian prees himself free from her grips, he wonders how one dragon can be so feisty and ferocious. However, he is glad that he has evolved, and he realizes that he has evolved into the hero class. He remembers that the red dragon had mentioned to him that she could as well have given him some blood to help him evolve, but she took this route because it was more fun. While he thinks about it all, the red dragon appears from behind him and tells him she's not done, causing a chill to go down his spine. As she rushes towards him to grab him, he points towards the rest of the goblins and tells her she can come back to play with him when she finishes her task of giving the rest of the goblins her dragon blood. The goblins who are nearby just watch in confusion, wondering what the boss is talking about. The red dragon swings right into action and starts to run towards the goblins, who wonder what the heck is going on. That evening, a celebration ensues in the Tianquang tribe. Everyone celebrates the fact they've evolved after consuming the dragon blood. Some of the guys are happy they can evolve and boast about how they'll become big guys. As the goblins compare their stats, Lin Tian just sits with the red dragon, who is now fast asleep. Overwhelmed by his new strength, our guy concludes that the dragon race deserves the title of the legendary dragon race, because just this dragon has allowed all second-generation goblins to evolve into the hero class. After all the fanfare, Lin Tian realizes that his overall strength is a little low, so he decides to get equipment to increase his chances. He tells the system to open the shop so he can exchange his credit points for high-end equipment, because he realizes he needs some prestige to set him apart as the leader of the hero class. When the system windows open, it displays that he has 180 points, so our guy decides to look for the best weapon he can exchange with these points. The first weapon he finds is an elemental crossbow, which shoots long range, absorbs all 4 elements, and shoots elemental arrows made from all 4 elements. He thinks it's cool and checks the next thing, which is a skill that allows the user to catch a weapon with their bare hands 3 times, which costs 80 points. Lin Tian decides to buy the crossbow and this amazing skill because it can prove useful in the battle against the Sword Saintess and will most likely save his life. He quickly exchanges his credit points and makes his purchase. He soon receives the skill and the weapon, which he thinks is a beauty. As he considers the crossbow, he decides to find a test subject to try it out on. Conveniently, Captain Loader, who is still tied to his cross, now to the neck, continues to glare at MC. Lin faces him and decides that the captain will be a suitable test subject to test his crossbow on. As our guy walks towards the captain asks him what he's going to do with the weapon with him, but Lin Tian gives him no response. We don't see how it ends, but we know Loader became the first to experience how powerful Lin Tian has become. Goodbye, Captain. Meanwhile, in the enchanted forest, a few warriors are seen having a field day. One of the women, a mage, complains that the low-level monsters are boring and they don't see the point of fighting against them. The second woman believes they should have stayed in Bright Town with the sword saintess so they could deal with the dragons. Their captain tells them the dragon mother continually harasses Bright Town, so the sword saintess can't afford to leave, so she sends them here to deal with the goblins, which is a great opportunity for them. Their captain tells them to stay sharp because they can't afford to waste this opportunity. While they chat, one of them notices something in the forest, so they all prepare to battle. It turns out to be a giant spider, which spooks one of them because of her hate for spiders. One of the women pierces the spider with one hit using advanced skills, and the spider meets its end. The woman says it's just a class 3 bug and there's no reason to be afraid. While they talk, they notice that there's something else in the woods, so they look closer. Just right behind the dead spider, one of the second-generation goblins who is now leveled up appears to the team. The goblin stands in front of them, towering over them. The adventurers realize that it's a goblin, and one in a hero class at that. The second-generation goblins, who look so full of power, just stare at them. The warriors discuss amongst themselves that this must be the infamous leader of the goblins, and they can't believe they found him so soon. One of the women, excited to hear that, declares that the fame will be theirs for slaying the leader of the goblins. The warriors stand in position and prepare to attack the goblin, Goblin Tian, who now has 4 arms after having evolved from consuming dragon blood. The captain rushes towards the dragon and asks the archers to cover him, but one of the warriors has another idea. The knight among them tells the captain not to rush, but to let him make the kill. He tells the captain that he has killed many goblins on the way, so he asks for the chance to have this kill for himself. The captain is skeptical of making that call, but the knight insists that he has only had the chance to kill lower goblins, but he would love a chance to kill a hero-class goblin. Reluctantly, the captain agrees and leaves the knight to it, hoping that the fight will end very soon. The knight tells the captain to leave it to him and walks toward the goblin. He tells them to watch as he damages the goblin in one shot, then strikes a pose to perform an advanced technique. The knight does an intermediate skill called the Raging Vortex and throws his weapon at the goblin at incredible speed, expecting the collision to result in its death. The goblin doesn't get out of the way but seems to be preparing to land his own attack. The air grows tense as the adventurers wait to see if the weapon will indeed tear through the goblin. Eventually it doesn't, as the goblin just catches it like a little paper plane. After he catches the hit, he throws it back at the knight, so the captain quickly tells the mage to activate her magic shield. The impact of the return throw is so strong that it almost breaks the shield. The knight quickly quiets down with all his big talks, seeing that he would be roadkill if the mage had acted a second too late. The archer tells them the goblin is a power type, so they may not have a good chance of direct confrontation due to its strength. She suggests that they step back from it so she can hit it with her arrows. While she talks, she feels a sudden strike from behind her as a hand pierces her from the back. She realizes a little too late that a goblin assassin is behind her and has plunged his hand into her stomach. She struggles to announce the presence of the enemy as she starts to lose blood. The other team members soon spot the assassin, but the captain, who painfully realizes that they are ambushed, tells them not to break the formation. The knight turns backwards to face the onslaught that is coming from behind, while the captain and mage focus on the goblin in front of them. While the warriors try to adjust their formation and defend themselves, the mage alerts the captain to the presence of a bigger problem. The captain is shocked as he turns around and finds hundreds of goblins behind them, and they're all in the hero class. The captain soon realizes that they're toast. After the goblins defeat them, the 4-armed goblin declares that the men they captured are theirs. He picks up one of the female warriors and says he'll keep her for himself, planning to do some playing with her later. Berserker, who is standing nearby, informs him that the men aren't theirs, but the spoils of war. He reminds him that the boss had told them to keep all the humans they find alive, and he reminds him that they already lost one human due to his fooling around, so he'll get nothing. 4 arms over there start to throw a tantrum because they have killed so many humans and they deserve to keep them. He insists that they're strong now and they can choose to keep the spoils of war. The other goblins nearby tell Berserker that 4 arms is right because the second generation of goblins are the strongest in the tribe now, which means the whole tribe should listen to them. Some of the other hero-class goblins tell Berserker, who is their eldest brother, that he's truly the strongest now, and they'll listen to him. Berserker takes a good look at himself from the reflection on his weapon and begins to think deeply. He soon discards his thoughts and tells them to carry the loot home first. When they reach the tribe, the goblins are excited to learn that the hero-class goblins have returned, especially with quite a few humans and much loot. They start to chant Goblin Tien's name. Meanwhile, the elf clan mother asks Lin Tien if he's sure he can still control them, but he doesn't answer. When the hero-class goblins enter the tribe, Goblin Tien holds on to the captain they captured and says he'll eat him because he's his loot. Lin Tien simply approaches Tien to drop the captain because the man has the information that he needs. Four Arms becomes angry at the statement. He refuses to drop the man and tells Lin Tien to give him some of his women in exchange for the man. Yue and the clan mother, who is standing nearby, are alarmed by Tien's words, and they realize a power tussle is about to occur. Our guys ask Goblin Tien if he understands what he's saying since he's their leader. Four Arms tells him that's not true because they've decided that Berserker is their new leader and they're going to follow him. Berserker, who is embarrassed to have been put in this compromising position, just stands there quietly. Lin Tien congratulates Berserker and tells him he now knows he's the mastermind behind all of this. Our guys tell Berserker to kill Goblin Tien as a show of his loyalty, and he'll forgive him. Four Arms starts to make fun of MC, telling him that Berserker won't listen to him because he's their new boss. As he continues to make fun of the boss, he feels a hand wrap around his head. He continues to threaten Lin Tien that they'll kill him today and rule the tribe themselves. The clan mother and Lin Tien watch closely to see what will happen. In the twinkle of an eye, Berserker closes his palm and crushes Tien's head under the pressure of his hold. Berserker drops Tien's lifeless body in front of Lin Tien and his women, leaving the other goblins in shock because he had killed a brother. Berserker explains to Lin Tien that after leveling up, he's come to understand many things. He tells him that, unlike the other arrogant idiots in the hero class, he respects him. Berserker calls him father and tells him that he became leader by defeating the last leader. This time Berserker mentions that he'd like to try. Berserker's stats show that he's a level 50, with a vitality of 1000, a strength of 340, a defense of 240, and an overall strength of 1200. Lin Tien gives a sly grin and thinks to himself that this kid has decided to challenge him because he now has an overall strength of 1200. He tells him that he's glad to see him grow. As he speaks, his body starts to emit fire as he taps into the undiscovered strength of his new hero class. To be sure, our guy asks Berserker if he's truly sure he wants to challenge him. This time, his entire body is surrounded by fire. As Berserker and the boss face each other in a standoff, some of the hero class who had arrived from the war hail Berserker, telling him to kill Lin Tien and show him who's boss. They add that he needs to kill him and steal all the women. Lin Tien just chuckles and tells them he'd like to confirm something again. He soon develops fire in his hands, using magical powers. He tells the hero class goblins who still want to follow him to stand behind him, and he tells them every other person will be killed. Meanwhile, the captain of the adventurers is surprised to learn that the leader of the hero class goblins is such a simple-looking person. He thinks to himself that they're quite lucky to be captured when the tribe has internal power tussles, which will give them a great chance to escape. The captain believes that even though Lin Tien can use powers, the strength gap between him and Berserker is too great. The captain decides to wait until Lin Tien is killed so they can find a good chance to escape. After many of the hero-class goblins gather behind our guy, he jokes that it seems that he's the better leader because only a few of the hero class stand beside Berserker. Berserker starkly tells him he's not after gathering any form of followership, but his only desire is to pursue strength. As he makes the statement, Berserker holds out his weapon to get right into battle. Berserker lands several strikes against the boss, but he quickly dodges them. The captain, who is tied to the ground, acts as a commentator and notices that Berserker seems to have more strength, but the boss is super fast. After Lin Tien dodges all the attacks, he tells Berserker that he's good with his sword, but he suddenly brings out his crossbow and shoots it at him, still having that sly grin on his face. The elemental arrow flies straight ahead with breakneck speed and heads for Berserker. Berserker, who thinks on his feet, reasons that this is a weapon he has never seen before. Due to the speed of the arrow, he quickly reasons that he can't dodge, and his best chance is to tank it. Berserker quickly shields himself with his weapon and charges through the attack. Our guy is impressed by Berserker's quick thinking, but just stands there as Berserker charges at him. Still standing, Berserker attempts to land a fatal blow using his sword. A strange fire erupts and takes over the entire battleground, due to the immense energy being released, shielding the battle from the sight of the onlookers. After the explosion clears out, Berserker is surprised to find out that the boss had simply caught his blade, while still standing there. He believes it's impossible because he gave it all his strength. Lin Tien tells him he's a good fighter, but he has to realize who he's up against. Our guy used his blade stealer skill, which allowed him to catch an incoming weapon with their bare hands 3 times. In such close combat, the boss brings out his crossbow and fires it right at Berserker's face in close range. Berserker sees the fiery arrow come right at his face and realizes he's done for. After the arrow lands a fatal blow, some of Berserker's blood is split everywhere. Lin Tian asks him if he'd like to continue. But Berserker, who had lost both his eyes due to the impact of the arrows, refuses, accepting the death penalty. The boss just looks at him, wondering where he learned all this, and notices his stubbornness. Meanwhile, the other hero-class goblins who rebelled quickly go on their knees and start to beg the boss, claiming that they'll never do it again. They claim that they'll become loyal and follow him forever. Lin, who just glares at them, reasons that they're a bunch of spineless trash. Suddenly, Berserker is healed of his wounds, and his eyes regenerate. The boss tells him to rise, and he does. It turns out that the boss had asked Freya to use her magic to reverse the adverse effect of the arrow and to heal him. The boss tells him that he's courageous and promises not to kill him as long as he remains loyal to him. Berserker is surprised at the turn of events, so he asks if the boss really meant what he said. Lin Tian tells him that he does, but he can't forgive the other hero-class goblins who are spineless trash, so he tells Berserker to kill them all. The hero-class goblins who rebelled open their mouths and wide when they hear the boss's verdicts, realizing that they're toast. Berserker thanks the boss for sparing his life and pledges to follow the boss forever due to this act of compassion. He takes a look at the rebellious hero-class goblins with a devilish look on his face and tells the boss to leave them to him. The rebellious goblins just stand there startled, expecting their doom, since they know they're no match for Berserker's strength. As Berserker approaches them, they cower in fear and beg him to spare them. But he doesn't listen to their cry at all. After ripping them limb from limb, Berserker leaves their bodies right in front of the whole town. The boss orders his other lower-level goblin children to feed on the hero-class goblins, because it'll make them stronger. The goblins, who don't waste time whenever they hear talk of meat, rush to the corpse of the other goblins and start to have their fill. Some of the other goblins hail the boss and promise to follow him for the rest of their lives. Meanwhile, the new captain, who is tied close to where Loader is hung, asks him what sort of terrifying monster he has managed to provoke. The captain of the adventurers tells him that this is not a mere mutated goblins, but a monster that will shake the empire. Lin Tian soon walks toward Loader and apologizes for making him miss the show that they just did. He also tells him he didn't believe that Loader expected these trashy warriors to save him. Lin Tian just laughs and tells him he's so naive. Loader replies that it's the fault of the sword saintess because all she does is hide in the town, calling her the B-word. Loader, who looks like he's losing his mind, starts to laugh uncontrollably, high level, and he screams out that they're all trash. The new captain tells Lin Tian not to be so arrogant because the sword saintess is going to come here after she deals with all the dragons and will destroy the entire tribe. Lin Tian just laughs and asks the captain if he thinks the dragons are working on their own. He thanks him for the information because that tells him that the mother of the purple dragon is doing well on her end. The captain realizes that Lin Tian knows something about the dragon attacks, so he commends him for tricking the sword saintess and the entire royal army. He tells the boss that he can kill him, but he won't give him the chance to insult him. The captain tells him that he'd rather die than face the same thing Loader is facing, so he asks Lin Tian to be quick about it. Our boy, who listens to his rant, just watches with disappointment. Eventually, Lin Tian tells him he'll grant him his desires, so he spills his blood. Meanwhile, in the sword saintess's room, she is rashly woken up by one of her night guards, who keeps calling her names. She asks him why he's so flustered when they had just successfully sent away the dragons. When he hesitates to answer, she asks him if the knights she sent to the enchanted forest are back, to which the man tells her they are. He informs her they're back, but only one person made it back alive. This news leaves the lady boggled out of her mind, and with that, the chapter ends, leaving us craving for more. The story continues in Bright Town. She goes outside to see the injured knight who had come alone, and the nuns tell her that he's too badly injured and healing potions won't work on him anymore. The sword saintess stares at him with a frown on her face and asks him how he's so badly injured, asking where the other knights are. The knight lies helpless on his deathbed and stammers as he tells the sword saintess that they ran into a group of hero-class goblins. He begs her to go save the captain and the rest of them and coughs due to his pain. He struggles to speak and tells them to be careful because the goblins are quite extraordinary, and this statement makes the nearby nuns terrified. The knight soon passes out due to pain and exhaustion. The nun quickly rushes to his side and tells him to stay strong. Meanwhile, a mage that's standing nearby exclaims that it's not possible that goblins could do this amount of damage. The leader of the knights loudly declares that it doesn't matter if they're hero-class goblins and says that they should go destroy those low-level beasts. The sword saintess just remains silent and looks out a window. She soon breaks her silence and tells the others to hold out on their plans. She explains that the dragons are attacking more and more frequently, and if they leave, they can attack more easily. She also explains that they could easily get ambushed by the goblins and confesses that she can't defeat them alone with little manpower. She tells the leader of the knights to reach out to the royal family to send over more support to Bright Town. She tells him that when the time comes, she'll slaughter the goblins and the purple gold dragon with her own hands. The Knight Leader asks her what they'll do about the members of the Silver Blade team who are still in the goblins' hold, and the mage asks him if he thinks they have any chance of survival. Out of nowhere, a guy named Kazimov, the captain of the Reaper Knights team, butts into their discussion and tells the Master Sword Saintess that there's no need to rescue them. He says that those who are boastful usually die first, so it makes sense if the Silver Blade team got too cocky and it cost them their lives. Kazimov asks for permission to rescue whoever is still alive and clear out the goblins on his own. The Sword Saintess just scoffs and reminds him that a whole team got wiped out and asks why he'd want to go alone. Kazimov starts to remove his hat, and he tells her that he has survived 4 Titan warriors alone previously, so this won't be any different. He removes his face scarf and says that even if it's against a group of hero-class goblins, there's no chance that they can lay a finger on him. He exposes the other half of his face and shows a gruesome scar to prove his point that he's seen worse things in the past, and he's lived to tell the story. When the Sword Saintess agrees, he tells her to just wait for the good news. Meanwhile, things seem to be going well in the Goblin tribe, and it seems they've built a wall. Inside, Lin tells the system to open the simulation panel so he can know what will befall them in the next couple of days. When the simulation panel loads, it tells him that the current scenario is that they've defended themselves against the human race. The system says he successfully led the goblins and dragons to victory and constructed a hero-class clan. He has destroyed unloyal subjects and established his authority, and as such, he has gained greater respect from both goblins and dragons. The system finally shows that, however, under the order of the Sword Saintess, Kazimov, also known as the Grim Reaper, snuck into the clan and killed many of his people. Although he successfully restrained him, the clan suffers from great losses. Lin is surprised that Kazimov will dare counterattack him as a one-man army. He wonders how naive he can be, and also wonders how one man can manage to inflict so much damage on the clan. The system displays the 3 options he has, and tells him his first option is to migrate to avoid the attack, which gives him no points. The second is to ambush Kazimov, which gives him plus 110 points. The last option is to attack first and kill Kazimov, which gives him 20 points. Lin decides to go with the last option, and decides to attack him instead of waiting for him. He reasons that they can greatly minimize their losses if they attack him first. The simulation system simulates his selection and shows that the conclusion is that he and Kazimov will fight to the death, and it prays that the gods be with him. After it awards Lin his 20 points, it shows him the options simulation shows he has 3 days left till Kazimov shows up, and he'll have to take his life. Lin reasons that it looks like this Kazimov guy isn't some nobody since the system says it'll be a fight to the death. He decides it's wise to gather some information about him before attacking first. In the tribe, Captain Loader laughs maniacally when he finds out that Kazimov is nearby. While still on the cross, he laughs like a maniac and celebrates the appearance of someone who finally knows what they're doing. He tells Lin and his ladies that they're dead meat because Kazimov has fought against so many Titan warriors. When he hears Loader's words, the boss mentions to him that it seems that the knights trust this Kazimov guy so much. He goes ahead to ask Loader what Titan warriors are. Loader tells him that Titan warriors are mutated with Titan genes from the enemy country, which gives them incredible strength. Apparently, they're creatures that can easily destroy Class 5 beasts with their bare hands. The captain continues to laugh like a maniac, and he mocks that it's all over for them if Kazimov is coming around. Lin agrees with Loader and tells him it looks like Kazimov is an opponent worthy to be feared, and Loader tells him to wait to get his butt kicked. Lin thinks to himself and decides that it's best to be careful and send someone to gather some intel on this Kazimov guy. Days later, Kazimov comes into the enchanted forest all alone on his horse. As he rides in, he notices that there isn't a single beast in the whole forest, which is way too unusual. He continues his journey and runs into the bloody remains of the dead members of the Silver Blade team. He looks at the bloodstains and calls them a group of trash. On the ground, there's a broken shield, some of the mage's clothing, and a deserted sword. The Grim Reaper jokes about how fresh the smell of the blood is and how weird it all is, and he seems excited. He looks closely at the bloody scene and thinks to himself that he hopes he can enjoy himself this time. While he's thinking, he suddenly hears a scream for help from nearby. He turns back and wonders where the cry for help is coming from. Kazimov stops the horse with his foot and turns toward the direction of the sound. He goes into a sprint and rushes to the area he hears the scream from. Upon getting there, he finds a woman lying on the ground who turns her back on him, and she looks injured and battered. He doesn't get down from his horse and asks the trembling woman who she is. Ifreya, who starts to shiver, turns around and looks at him. Kazimov immediately recognizes her and is alerted to meet her in the forest, especially in such a state. Ifreya looks teary-eyed, and she begs him to help her and tries to reach out her hand. Kazimov calls her by name and wonders how she wasn't killed by the goblins. He asks her how she managed to survive and asks where Loader is. She begins to weep and tells him that she managed to escape from the Goblin tribe, but Loder has been killed. Kasimov is surprised to hear that Loder has been killed and asks her to tell him the location of the Goblin tribe. Ifreya points behind her and tells him the tribe is in that direction, and tells him they're very scary, with a very worried look on her face. He only sarcastically asks her if that's so when she tries to warn him that they're scary. What a cocky guy. He immediately triggers his horse into a sprint to destroy the Goblin tribe all by himself. Meanwhile, he leaves Ifreya behind, and she calls out to him, begging him to bring her to safety. He doesn't even turn around and tells her to go back herself. He tells her not to bother him because he has business to do as he continues on his way to the supposed Goblin tribe. As Kasimov rushes down the path, we see that he has a class called the Solo Knight. His class skill allows him to receive a 30% elemental buff when acting alone. His class also allows him to receive a 20% elemental buff for every enemy he slays. Finally, there is no limit to the stacking effect until the end of whatever battle he's fighting. Kasimov keeps his eyes on the target and thinks to himself that since Loder is dead, it's good news for him since nothing is stopping him from activating his Solo Knight skill. He reasons that if he attacks the Goblin tribe first and stacks up his buff, it wouldn't matter if they're all hero class in the tribe. As the Grim Reaper continues down the path, he suddenly runs into a trip rope, but he's unable to quickly react because of the speed he's moving. The rope causes his horse to fall over, but he lands on his hands and pushes himself back on his feet. Tough guy. He looks back at the trap and wonders if he's being ambushed. Out of nowhere, Ifreya shows up with a weapon in her hands, and this time she doesn't look friendly. He's surprised to see her and asks her why she hasn't returned to the town. Suddenly, Ifreya activates her Holy Light Blast magic attack around Kasimov, which causes him to scream out in pain. He looks at her in surprise as he grips his chest and asks her what she's doing. Ifreya smiles at him and just tells him that the master told her to kill him, bearing up her weapon. She activates the Holy Light and blasts him again, breaking the ground he's standing upon. Kasimov responds with his own trick and covers himself with a sinister purple cloud called the Soul Reaper. He suddenly reaches out of the purple cloud and grabs Ifreya's hair, holding her captive. He calls her the B word and asks what spell she's under to dare attack him. He holds her hostage and licks her skin, telling her that he won't hold back if she plans to kill him. He asks her if she thinks he only likes to kill monsters and says he would enjoy slicing her skin off as well. He decides it'll be suitable if he kills her, because it'll be a good chance to stack up his buff. Ifreya just remains helpless in his arms. Before he can kill her, Kasimov hears a surprising voice from behind him, telling him it's no surprise that he came alone. He turns around and notices Lin holding his sword. Lin tells him that it's clear that his class kill and equipment are both hard to deal with. Lin's presence surprises Kasimov, but Ifreya just smiles out of delight. The boss scans the weapon and learns it's called the Black Steel Sword, with a skill of Death Reaping, which is a high attack speed, and the AoE effect increases critical damage by 90%. He mentions that it's good that he came to him first because it would have cost them great losses to let him ambush them and stack up his buff. Kasimov is surprised to see him holding his weapon and asks himself how such a low-class goblin instantly stole his weapon. He lets down his guard, and Ifreya rushes to go meet Lin, calling him master. Kasimov curses at her and asks if she dares sell herself to goblins as a slave to survive. The boss asks him what that is to him since Ifreya is a good dog. Ifreya kneels close to him, and he pets her head, which she seems to enjoy. Lin says that Ifreya is a good dog, but he, on the other hand, is a disappointment because he thought he was strong. He says it turns out that he's just a creep who just likes to assassinate. Kasimov tells him he doesn't know how he managed to gather intel about him and calls him a lowly goblin. He prepares to attack and tells him that even without his weapon or buff skill, he will still send him to hell. As Kasimov rushes towards Lin with a dagger he hid all along, the boss doesn't even move an inch, and Ifreya stands behind him. As the Grim Reaper moves closer, he stops in his tracks when he realizes they're not alone, but they've come with a team of hero goblins and a dragon. They must have ambushed him using their silent step skill while he wasn't watching. A sinister grin develops on Lin's face, and he tells him he'd like to see who goes to hell first. The dragon releases a pool of fire on Kasimov, roasting him on the spot. A blurry image of Kasimov, who is crying out from pain, is seen through the fire. Shortly after, Lin and the others return to the tribe, and the goblins in the village rejoice that the boss brought back prey. A look of horror develops on Loder's face when the corpse of Kasimov, the all-powerful Grim Reaper, is dropped in front of him. Loder screeches in shock, curses the sword saintess for sending people to get them killed, and suspects that she's in league with Lin. Lin, on the other hand, focuses on cultivating rare-type goblins and decides that these corpses are prime nutrients that can serve them. He assigns Kasimov's corpse to a goblin called Gobshan and tells him to share the leftovers with the others. Gobshan was chosen for rare goblin testing because he has innate talent genes and sadistic tendencies, which is perfect. At this point, The Silver Blade Squad, one of the 3 knight squads that the sword saintess controls, has fallen into his hands, and the news of Kasimov's death will certainly crush her morale. She'll definitely make a move to turn the situation around. To know what she'll do, our boy decides to run a simulation. After he runs the simulation, he laughs at how greedy the sword saintess turned out to be, and rejoices that he seems to be the one who won this game in the end. He quickly orders Gubkwang to gather all the others immediately because he'll lead them to accomplish something big the next day. Not long after, Kasimov's dead body is discovered outside the city and is reported to the sword saintess. The other knights are shocked that such lowly goblins could have killed Kasimov in just a bit over a day, and the sword saintess reasons that the frequent attacks of the dragons and their inability to subdue the goblins aren't coincidences. She realizes that the goblins must be in league with the vile dragons to overrun their bright town, and they can't afford to remain passive any longer. She immediately orders every member of the Battle Roar squad to the capital to get reinforcements, and they head out. While they're on their way, a warrior named Bane asks what will become of the city's defenses while they're gone. He proposes that he go to the capital alone while they stay back to defend the city, but the mage insists that they follow the saintess's plan since one of them will be able to come back to request backup if they run into an ambush. During the journey, they run into a destroyed bridge, and the mage asks them to detour because she suspects the bridge was deliberately destroyed. However, the captain decides they take this way regardless, because their enemies must have set an ambush on the other path. So they decide to rebuild the bridge before nightfall. By dusk, they finish building and hurry across. While crossing the bridge, it suddenly gets dark, and a dragon appears right above them. On the dragon's back, they notice a goblin. It turns out to be Lin, confirming that the dragons are in league with the goblins. Lin commends their building skills, and the captain promises to kill him with his own hands. In response, the dragon shoots out fire on the bridge, forcing them to turn back before it collapses. When the captain threatens to kill Lin again, our boy hopes that he can defeat his goblins and the dragon mother, who is on her way. The squad is soon surrounded by goblins, and the mage informs the captain that they don't stand a chance if the dragons meet them there. The captain immediately orders Bane to sprint back to the city to report the situation while they hold off the goblins. Bane charges through the goblins while the rest focus on the squad. The mage signals to the captain that something is off, mentioning that it seems the goblins are deliberately letting Bane escape. After she says this, Lin confirms and informs them that the Dragon Mother isn't coming. It was just a ruse to lure the Sword Saintess out of Brighttown. The real plan is to deal with Brighttown after the Sword Saintess leaves. When they realize they've been tricked, the captain angrily orders them to focus on taking Lin down and holding out until the Saintess arrives. However, Goblin Kwang, also known as Berserker, charges at the captain and they clash weapons. As they fight, the captain realizes their strength matches his own and notices that Berserker is wielding Kasimov's sword. Immediately, Lin informs the guys that time is short and leaps down from the dragon's back with a gun in his hands, prompting the goblins to finish the knights before the Saintess arrives. Not long after, Berserker knocks the captain down while another goblin bites through the flesh of one squad member. The captain soon realizes he had underestimated these goblins. Shortly after, Lin reminds them that their time is short and orders them to devour the corpses before the Saintess arrives. One goblin, who has managed to overrun the mage, thanks the boss for the privilege and quickly goes ahead to do his business. Meanwhile, the Sword Saintess charges toward the area with a group of knights. When she doesn't find the squad there, she worries they're already too late. Eventually, they stumble upon the bones of the Battle Roar squad, and Bane crashes close to the skeleton of his commander, weeping profusely. The Sword Saintess stares in shock when she notices that the goblins didn't even leave bodies for them to find. When Bane mentions that there was one goblin among them who could control dragons, she reconfirms that the dragons are indeed joining forces with the goblins. It shocks her to hear that this goblin ordered a dragon to breathe fire on the bridge, and she realizes that these bones are the leftovers of hungry goblins. However, she finds it odd that no dragons came like they said. It suddenly hits her that this must have been a decoy strategy to lure them away from Brighttown. With swiftness, she orders the knights to follow her back because something bad is about to happen. When they get back to the town, they're met by citizens mourning their lost ones and heaps of ruins. In the middle of it all, the Sword Saintess collapses to her knees, wondering how all of this could have happened. She watches as one of the citizens mourns his dead father. When she tries to comfort him, he slaps away her hand, accusing her of always pretending to work hard to protect them when she was nowhere to be seen when the goblins came. The other citizens join in, condemning her inability to protect them and accusing her of being a bad person. She remains in utter shock, unable to say anything except stammer a few words. She stays crouched in their midst as they continue to speak hurtful words against her. Meanwhile, the Dragon Mother watches in satisfaction and commends Lin's competency in destroying the city and breaking the Sword Saintess without even facing her directly. This makes her eager to meet Lin again. Meanwhile, in the Tianquang tribe, Lin and the others soon arrive. When he gets closer, our boy asks one of his top goblins, Gobdi, how he handled the task he was entrusted with. Gobdi quickly replies that the raid went smoothly, and that they were able to bring back many spoils and prisoners. Additionally, as per Lin's orders, they sent a cart of gold to Kyria, the lady Lin met when he first reincarnated, and escorted her and her family out of the city. In return, Lin rewards Gobdi and Gobshan with the privilege of devouring magical creatures. He feels happy about repaying Kyria with kindness, since she was the only one who believed in him in his previous life. Not long after, our boy goes to see the Dragon Mother, who happily mentions that she heard the Sword Saintess has fallen ill and cannot get out of bed. In return, Lin asks her to keep sending dragons to harass Brighttown to keep pressuring the Sword Saintess. However, the Dragon Mother requests compensation for flying back and forth every day since it's exhausting. When Lin offers some more animals as usual, she grabs his face and starts sucking on it because she has other rewards in mind. Lin smirks and asks if she's joking with him, but she replies that she doesn't mind having his baby and will be very upset if he refuses. When she gets completely naked, Lin confesses that he didn't think a weak little goblin like himself could ever be worthy of the Dragon Mother, but she assures him that he's no ordinary goblin. He has the potential to become a goblin king. After their lovemaking, the system informs Lin that his stats have increased massively. Glad to have gained so many stats for free, he decides to sneak away while the Dragon Mother sleeps and gets back on his own dragon to go home. The next day, Princess Kasana angrily berates Lin for trying to chase them away, but he explains that he's letting them go because they now have humans to use for reproduction. In truth, Lin is making a gamble to win their loyalty instead of forcing them to stay because elves are worth more than humans. Suddenly, the Holy Mother tells Kasana and the rest to leave if they wish and informs them she'll be staying back. She kneels before Lin and requests to stay with the tribe because she has realized he's no ordinary goblin from the time they've been together, and Lin allows it. He realizes she has chosen to stay because she sees him as a potential asset for the elves, but Kasana, who is in tears, wonders why her dear mother would choose to stay in such a place. Upon hearing that, Kasana and the rest of the female elves choose to stay back as well, and things work out just as our boy planned. He immediately promises to guarantee their safety, since they're no longer his slaves, but his subordinates should they choose to stay. With the Sword Saintess down and no external threat, it seems to be the best time for the golden era of development for many heroic breeds. Not long after, Berserk comes to complain that the human assigned to him is too small for him, so the Holy Mother informs Lin that they can assist with artificial breeding. Suddenly, one of the goblins rushes to inform Lin to come to Gobusen, who seems to have died. When he finds the goblin's body, he's told that Gobusen was scratching his body erratically until he died. Out of nowhere, the dead goblin suddenly grows spikes on his body and rises back from the dead, shocking the rest of the clan. Gobusen is now a level 50 mutant goblin in the Berserker class with many more skills. If it had not been for the stats that Lin gained from the Holy Mother, he may not have been able to withstand Gobusen's power. Meanwhile, the resurrected Gobusen celebrates how he didn't die but got stronger. 3 months later, in the tavern in Brighttown, some warriors chat about how the Sword Saintess hasn't recovered yet, and they joke about it. While they're chatting, a knight steps in and mentions that only the Bloodstorm heroes can handle this bunch of goblins properly. The knight is the diamond-ranked Blizzard hero captain, Prince Sizer. After 3 months of steady breeding, Lin amassed 150 third-generation heroic goblins. Meanwhile, the royal family issued 3 bounties with a reward of 100 gold coins, and adventurer groups of various ranks are flocking to Brighttown to eliminate the goblin tribe. Our boy learns all this from a simulation, and is told to prepare accordingly because he'll be facing Diamond and Epic ranked opponents. Diamond ranks are elites of humanity, and the power of the Epic ranked surpasses that of even the Sword Saintess, leaving Lin slightly overwhelmed by the message. Not long after, he receives a report from the Holy Mother and Goblin Yue that the new goblins have mostly matured, but forest resources are running low, and everyone is starting to get hungry. Apart from that, the nearby iron mines are nearly depleted, causing a lack of weapons and training. Upon hearing that, Lin realizes they have to relocate to a defensible, resource-rich place to be able to deal with the fire coming from Brighttown. He orders that everyone prepare to move immediately, and the Holy Mother goes to deliver his message. They find a cave behind a waterfall, which has complete and deep tunnels ideal for their new home, so Lin orders some goblins to clear the rubble while the others take care of the captives and children. Lin announces to the entire tribe that this is their new home, and promises proper living conditions for those who obey his orders, but death to those who disobey rules, which makes the goblins praise Lin. After settling the tribe, Lin considers investigating the situation in Brighttown so he can figure out what these adventurers are up to and scheme a plan. Meanwhile, in the tavern, the bartender asks the prince why he's taking care of these goblins when he only kills high-level monsters. and Xizer replies that he has to deal with the goblins himself to save his useless cousin, Loader. Suddenly, one of the old adventurers who came for the bounty tells Xizer to take care of the goblins and keep the reward instead of making him come all this way. All heads turn to the man, and they're shocked to find out he's Grey Hat Mage, the leader of the diamond-level Grey Hat Hero Party. Caesar playfully retorts that the Grey Hat Mage has quite an attitude, but he's soon interrupted by a man who laughs and asks them if they think they can act out just because the sword saintess has weakened. He reminds them that the cold-blooded woman and epic adventurer named Lucelina is here, who is said to kill everything, good or bad, just in a bid to get money, and the men in the tavern cower in fear. Caesar asks the man who just spoke if he's also here for the goblins, but the man says he only came around to slay a dragon for fun, hoping to become an epic-level adventurer. Regardless, he warns them not to underestimate goblins because their evolutionary ability is frightening, even though they're low-level. The Grey Hat Mage concurs with him because the low-level species has been around since ancient times, and remains the enemy of all races after tens of thousands of years. Apparently, the extermination of goblins is a hassle, and the mage affirms that he wouldn't have bothered with this mess if it hadn't been for the bounty. Upon hearing that, Xizer receives the caution that they have to tread carefully, especially after great people have fallen prey to them. Caesar suggests to the Grey Hat Mage that they team up and offers to give him all the bounty once they win, and that's an offer the Grey Hat Mage can't refuse. After they team up, the mage suggests that they just charge into the forest and solve this with violence, but the prince replies that they have to scout and plan specifically because there are too many unknowns. However, the mage thinks he's being too careful, but while they're talking, an eccentric knight called Goblin Slayer walks by, and Xizer immediately goes to introduce himself. The Goblin Slayer is an odd personality who even conceals his voice, and the mage mentions how the Slayer once slaughtered a goblin chief and killed thousands of goblins in one battle. Those figures sound amazing to Caesar, so he asks the Goblin Slayer to team up with them. Shockingly, the Goblin Slayer replies that he doesn't need a team because they'd only slow him down, but the mage reminds him not to come crying for help when the goblins capture him for slaughter. Meanwhile, Lin watches the town from a nearby cliff and uses a skill called Sharp Eyes to zoom in on the Goblin Slayer, who is level 65 and has an overall power between the range of 1,000 to 3,000. That doesn't make any sense to Lin, making him wonder if his system is malfunctioning, but he's soon told that the system is fine. Our boy decides to keep a closer eye on the Goblin Slayer since he seems to be the biggest contender. Meanwhile, the group led by Caesar arrives at the previous location of the Tianquang tribe, and Gru can't fathom how a goblin tribe this big hadn't been discovered ages ago. While they're looking, Caesar hands Gru a strand of hair he found, and the old man puts it in his mouth and recognizes it's elf hair. That sounds absurd to Xizer, and he wonders if the elves are helping the goblins hide. Gru, on the other hand, believes the elves helped the goblins relocate and covered their tracks, so he lets out one of his butterfly pets that's drawn to the scent of elves and hopes to follow it to where they're hiding. When the butterfly leads them to a river, Caesar suggests that they just wait for the Goblin Slayer to show up, but Gru points out to him to look across the river, and they spot a goblin there. Immediately, the team springs into action and chases down the goblins, while Lin smirks that the prey has taken the bait. Suddenly, the Goblin Slayer shows up out of nowhere, and Lin hadn't been expecting him to show up at all. When the Slayer takes off all his armor to bathe, it turns out it's not a man after all, but a very beautiful woman. It's funny to Lin, but she doesn't seem human, and her abilities are exceptional. However, the leisure to bathe at such a time is unusual, which makes Lin suspect that she's deliberately trying to lure him down. So as not to take chances, he flies away on his dragon to go deal with the two diamond-ranked warriors first. As he flies away, he wonders what kind of intelligent species the Goblin Slayer is and would love to savor the experience. Meanwhile, Caesar and his team notice the goblin they're chasing has collapsed, so they suspect that the tribe is nearby. Suddenly, they're ambushed by a series of fiery arrows, and Gru immediately protects everyone from the impact of the ambush. Immediately after, Goblin Kwang shows up behind them, and Gru asks everyone to focus their attack on him, because he's most likely a hero-class goblin. Gru fires at the goblin with a fireball spell that causes a great explosion, and he protects himself with a shield. When the smoke clears, Goblin Kwang appears completely unscathed, which shocks the men. He launches out of the smoke towards them, but they soon notice that other elite goblins have also surrounded them and are closing in. It's astounding to Gru that these goblins have iron armor and weapons, so to avoid them getting close, he triggers a spell called Fountain of Life that strengthens his two magician accomplices. One of the two assisting magicians jumps into the air and fires a mid-tier magic called Ice Spikes that takes out a few goblins, and the other uses a mid-tier magic known as Quicksand Field and a Rain of Judgment that slows down the incoming goblins. Lin watches from the top of a cliff and asks one of his men, Go Booty, to create an opening for another goblin, Go Bu Kong, to charge in. Immediately, Gobuti leaps down towards the fighting spot and charges toward Gru, who is alarmed to see him closing in on him. He quickly avoids the incoming goblin, which allows Goblin Kwong and the other goblins to wreak havoc. Meanwhile, Caesar encourages the men not to be afraid and tells the shield-bearers to hold the line, but the shield-bearers are soon overrun by the goblins. Upon seeing that, Caesar prays to the Holy Lords to grant him the power to smite these vile creatures. He triggers an advanced magic called the Holy Light Enchantment, and he asks everyone to gather around him and form a blizzard formation to also help heal the injured quickly. As he charges the men to kill them all, Lin considers how the diamond-ranked adventurer party has abilities much greater than what he expected. They would have been invincible for any other goblin tribe, but unfortunately for them, they came to the wrong place. Suddenly, Gobusin, the mutated goblin, appears, and Gru is shocked to see a mutant goblin face to face. Meanwhile, the Goblin Slayer finishes her bath and muses about how fascinating and powerful goblins are. On the other side, Gobusan rips Gru apart and severely injures Caesar. The prince stares in horror as the dying old man begs him to help, but he's so scared that he takes off because these goblins are more demonic than he expected. Left alone, Gobusan approaches the old man, who keeps screaming for help. Meanwhile, Caesar runs away with fluids coming out of every hole in his body as he tries to avoid multiple arrows from elven snipers. Realizing he's surrounded, he prays that someone comes to save him, and he runs into the Goblin Slayer, whom he begs to save them. While he's making his plea, an army of goblins leaps towards him from behind to finish him off. Blood is shed, but it's not Caesar's, because he gets to watch as the Goblin Slayer takes out the advancing goblins with their own weapons. As she walks past him, he thanks her profusely and promises to repay her. Angry, she informs him that the only way he can repay her is to stay far away from her and calls him a ridiculous kid. As she walks towards the tribe, he begs her not to go because this isn't an ordinary goblin tribe, and there's definitely a goblin overlord among them. However, she heads there still, and hopes she does find a goblin overlord because that's the only way this will be satisfying to her. Meanwhile, Goblin Kwong holds the dead body of the mage, but he's suddenly attacked by a sword that's thrown into his back, and he collapses. The entire tribe watches in surprise, and Lin equally doesn't know what's going on until the Goblin Slayer shows up and asks Gobusan if he's the boss of the goblin group. When she insults the dumb look on his face, Gobusan angrily leads the others to kill the Slayer, so they charge at her. But she easily cuts them down like vegetables. Lin wonders what the Slayer's deal is. When he checks her skills in the system, she's using just normal attacks, and he begins to wonder if she knows magic. Suddenly, Gobusan uses his Mad War transformation skill to become more fearsome, and he charges at the Slayer, who doesn't appear fazed. When Gobusan comes in close, the Slayer jumps out of the way and cuts several of the spikes on his back as she does that. When the goblin turns around to see his assailant, she jumps back towards him to finish him off, but Gobusan becomes more irritated that she isn't dead yet. Before she can hit him, he shoots a sticky substance at her that impedes her movement. Meanwhile, Lin wonders if they should retreat while they can, and also considers the fact that their opponent is quite mysterious and is also an excellent breeding tool. Since a direct fight isn't working, he decides to switch to a war of attrition. Immediately, he tells everyone to back off for a bit and form a circle. They're to keep their distance and throw rocks if they can or use long-range attacks. As Lin flies across on the dragon, the Slayer is surprised to see a goblin that can tame dragons, and it excites her that there seems to be a worthy challenge here. The warriors obey their master and start to launch huge boulders towards the Slayer, who quickly slices through some of them with her sword. Suddenly, when the Slayer crouches and sticks her sword into the ground, Lin realizes that she's about to collapse since they've been fighting for over an hour. However, the Slayer removes her helmet, revealing a beautiful face that enthralls the goblins and makes them salivate. As Lin watches in confusion, he's shocked to see her stick her hands into Gru's body and pull out his head, which she says is the best kind of nourishment. When he sees that, he realizes he's underestimated her because she immediately begins to tear through the army of zombies. Angry, Gobusan charges toward her, but she throws her sword into his chest and uses a spell to make it bloom. The fiery energy it releases causes an explosion in Gobusan's chest that knocks him backward. Lin watches in shock as he wonders who she is and why she has the goblin's ability to devour people and gain their skills. Given the situation, the best option is to reduce casualties and retreat. Immediately, he tells Afreya, who's healing the injured goblins, to come with him and instructs the others to retreat immediately. The Slayer tries to stop them from leaving and acknowledges that she hasn't seen such a smart and powerful goblin in ages. She proposes that Lin let her get a closer look so she can spare their lives and heal Gobusan, who lies unconscious. However, our boy tells her he won't believe that nonsense. When she realizes he doesn't believe her, she removes her upper armor and completely disarms herself, then asks him if he now believes her. Seeing that she actually dropped her weapons and lowered her guard, he's fairly certain she's planning something, but he approaches her nonetheless to have a proper talk. The Slayer confesses that he's surpassed her expectations when she had only expected low-tier goblins. But when Lin asks her to complete her side of the bargain, she promises to keep her word. However, she throws a pin into his chest that immediately weakens him and confesses that he has the intelligence of a goblin king, even though he looks like a low-tier goblin, which is very much her type. Lin realizes she's tricked him, that he's fallen into this crazy woman's trap and has let his guard down. When he turns to his subordinates, he notices them turning their backs. When he asks why they're turning away instead of helping him, the Slayer informs him that they're under her control now and can't see what they're doing. She hugs him from behind and promises that she won't kill him, but will stick around if he lets her see what kind of being he'll become. She soon pushes him to the ground and starts to make out with him, but Lin can't even tell if she's serious. Meanwhile, Caesar watches from behind a bush as the two make love, shocked to learn that the Slayer is a woman. Not just a woman, but one who has intimacy with goblins. While watching, he's approached by a goblin who knocks him out and takes him away. Not long after, Lin leads the Slayer to the goblin den and warns her she'll face the consequences if she enters, but she insists that she just wants to see how strong he is. Our boy asks her about the strange power she has and how she can control him and his subordinates. She asks if he'll let her follow him if she tells him everything. He replies that it depends on what she says, so she informs him that she's the descendant of a goblin king. Shocked, Lin asks her why she looks just like a human when she's a descendant of a goblin king. She explains that her mother was human. She happened to be the offspring of the goblin king from among the group that violated her mother. Logically, the higher the rank of a goblin, the harder it is to have offspring, but she managed to survive. About a decade ago, she personally killed the goblin king who tried to force himself on her. After she devoured him completely, she gained the power of the king's blood, which allows her to control goblins and enabled her to slaughter the entire goblin dungeon. She added her blood to the forging of her weapon, so once you're hit, you can't disobey her and come under her control. Apparently, she became a goblin slayer because she hates goblins, and making love with strong goblins before killing them is a personal interest. Lin realizes why she has such a twisted personality and feels sorry for her, but she's a natural weapon against goblins, and it wouldn't be good for him if she became an enemy. Seeing that they have things in common, he asks her to join him, which amuses her because she had planned to use some tricks to make him let her join them. However, she replies that she can't because the situation in Brighttown is complicated now, and she can go back to be their spy, which is more interesting than staying here. Lin asks if she's really that kind, but she replies that he's her thing now, so she has to protect him first. At this point, our boy has never been so confused in his life. When he returns to his lair, he checks his stats and sees he's also been infused with the king's blood and his points have increased. Meanwhile, Caesar, who is tied nearby, sees his cousin Loder and mocks him for disgracing the family, which is why the sword saintess didn't want to come to save him herself. However, Loder points Caesar to the pot on the fire and informs him that they'll cook him in that pot. Not long after, one of the goblins lifts Caesar off the ground to take him into the pot, but he pleads not to be killed and offers to give them lots of women. As they drag Caesar away, he begs the goblin to stop and asks to speak with Lin. When Lin shows up, Loder pleads for Caesar's release and offers to fulfill any of his requests, while Caesar cries profusely. Surprised, Lin asks why a prisoner would be trying to bargain with him. Loder suggests cutting off one of Caesar's legs so he can return and bring news of Lin's survival back to the family, which will cause them to send more strong people he can consume. In a crazy frenzy, Loder speaks about how they all, along with the sword saintess, deserve to die and how he'll kill them all. Seeing that he's serious, Lin agrees with him, but the Holy Mother protests that their position will be exposed if they let Caesar go. However, Lin tells her not to worry and to trust him. The next day, some guy bursts into the tavern to lament about how things have gone south because he saw Caesar, now missing a leg, riding toward the royal city. Everyone is shocked and wonders if he and his team failed their mission. The mysterious adventurer who had claimed he only came to slay dragons wonders if the Grey Hats group and the Blizzard Braves squad were wiped out. The Slayer enters to affirm that. When she takes her seat, one of the men asks if she took part in the battle, and she also confirms it. When they ask about the goblin, she explains that she took care of hundreds of large goblins, including the mutated ones. When they hear the great news, the bartender gives her drinks on the house, and the rest of them praise the incredible feats of the Goblin Slayer. Suddenly, while they're celebrating, a troop of bat-like creatures flies in, but it turns out to be the cold-blooded mercenary troop coming in with a grand entrance. One of them asks the Goblin Slayer if she's been able to find the nest of the hundreds of goblins since they hide so well, but she says she hasn't found the nest and came back after killing the ones she saw. When they hear that, their leader asks her to leave the nest finding to them and hopes they can join forces once they find it. However, the Slayer explains that she doesn't like working at night, and she's not used to cooperating with others. When she walks out of the tavern, the leader decides to keep the bounty for their group, and they take their leave. That night, they head out to search, and one of them asks their captain what he thinks about the place they're searching, because there doesn't seem to be a large force around here. Regardless, the captain insists that the blood trail ends there, and they're definitely inside. Once the bats enter the cave, one of the goblin guards is surprised, but his counterpart tells him they're just bats and reminds him to be alert. As they move forward, they find just a handful of goblins and one mutated one, so they wonder if they got the wrong place since this is just a medium-sized tribe. However, since the Goblin Slayer told them there are so many large breed goblins, they decide to suck these ones dry of blood and look around further. As they charge towards the sleeping goblins, the leading bat is suddenly struck down by Freya's light beam. On the ground, she wonders how there can be holy nuns in a goblin nest. But the other goblins soon arise and set up torches that disorient the bats. Once they realize they can't get out, they ask the captain what they should do, but she doesn't answer. Lin suddenly approaches them and asks how they could dare come here to shed such blood. When the captain sees him, they transform into beautiful women and decide to kill them all normally since they're already exposed, especially since they're just a bunch of goblins. Their leader is a level 61 vampire named Lilith, with very high stats and an overall strength of 2800. It's a good thing that Lin got intel from the system about the cold-blooded mercenary troops' ambush and prepared beforehand. Lilith flies into the air and knocks the goblins away with her wings, knocking the flames in their hands away. Seeing that she easily took out the smaller goblins, Lin appears with the stronger hero goblins he raised, who release a blast of holy magic, which makes Lilith wonder how a lowly goblin can use holy magic. They're soon knocked to the ground, so Lin approaches them and proposes that they talk since neither of them will gain anything from fighting. Since it's obvious that they're here for the bounty, he asks why blood-drinking vampires need money. Lilith, however, responds that it's not easy to deal with the Holy Church and the Sword Saint, because they had to sign an agreement not to drink human blood, which requires them to work for money to buy blood. Lin watches with great intent, and he wonders if he can improve their clan's bloodline by getting them on his side. Our boy expresses his understanding and suggests that they cooperate. He offers to provide them with blood, but Lilith protests that the amount of blood they have is not even close to being enough for a long-term supply. In response, Lin explains that there are documents that indicate that the kidney is the source of vital essence and blood, and a man's love juice has the effect of substituting human blood for certain bloodthirsty monsters. The vampires watch in surprise, so Lin further explains that legend has it that there is a kind of monster called succubus. Long ago, they discovered that male love juice has this special effect, and since then, they have lived by extracting love juice. That way, they don't need to kill for it. They can just extract it everywhere and obtain nourishment and replenishment. Even if goblins lack everything, they don't lack this, so they can guarantee that they don't have to worry about blood if they can reach an agreement. While the vampires wonder how true this is, Lilith affirms that they'll know if it's true or not once they try. As she steps forward, one of her subordinates holds her back and reminds her that they're the Countess's kin, and they should wait for the Count, who is currently sealed. Lilith, however, protests that they've lost many of their sisters for hundreds of years, but they don't have to suffer and take risks anymore if this method is real. Soon after, Lilith does a practical session right in front of them and gets a load of the love juice. Once she swallows it, she realizes it really can replace blood, so the other ladies quickly rush forward to try. After they're done with Lin, he has to call the Holy Mother, Leah, to help him up after the starved vampires deal with him. Once they're satisfied, Lilith agrees to cooperate with them and asks Lin what he wants them to do. Our boy proposes they can live in the cave since it's always dark here, but they only need to protect the cave from intruders, which she eagerly accepts. Meanwhile, in a tavern over in Brighttown, a mysterious man gets insulted by some man who calls him a piece of crap, who's afraid of fighting goblins while he dares to call himself a diamond-ranked adventurer. The mysterious man, however, responds that he doesn't have time for his moral crap or to help him earn the bounty. While they're arguing, the sword saintess enters, shocking the men, who quickly state how excited they are that she's back. A few minutes later, they talk about how the sword saintess plans to go to Dragon Island alone, but needs their help to deal with the goblins while she's doing that. One guy isn't certain that ordinary folks like them can do it when the stronger ones have been defeated, but a certain ranger eagerly asks the saintess to count him in because he's willing to help uphold the way of protection and exterminate the goblins. This new guy is from the Gunner Hero Troop, Ellison, who's a diamond rank, so the sword saintess leaves the mission of leading those who'll be dealing with the goblins to him. Since you can only get to Dragon Island by boat, she asks the mysterious man if he'd be willing to help her since he can do object manipulation magic, and he eagerly agrees. His plan is to get promoted to epic rank adventurer once this is done. The next day, some tension builds on Dragon Island. The dragon mother is seen lying with her egg in her bosom when she feels the ground quake, jolting her from her sleep. She wonders what's going on, and one of the dragons soon shows up to inform her that the sword saintess has arrived. The dragon mother hadn't expected her to recover so quickly, especially at such a crucial moment when she's preparing for the birth of the child she conceived with Lin. She places the egg somewhere safe and transforms into her dragon form to settle her score with the crazy sword saintess once and for all. With intense anger, she flies out of her cave and finds a trail of dragon corpses close to the sword saintess, who's holding a blood-drenched sword. The dragon mother faces her squarely, and the saintess is glad that she's finally shown herself. The dragon mother retorts that the woman who was defeated by goblins has gotten back up, but the sword saintess promises to take her life for attacking her people. Immediately, the saintess activates her sword energy surge to give the dragon mother a taste of her power, but the dragon mother matches it with a burst of flames known as Wu flames. The clash of power is so intense that the mysterious guy who accompanied the saintess to the island has to hide nearby. He fears that this dragon is way too big, but he's suddenly picked up by the sword saintess, who pulls him from behind the rock. After dropping him, she tells him to get out of the way so he won't be a hindrance. Meanwhile, the dragon mother switches to another move and fires huge, deadly purple crystals at the saintess, which she has to cut through. One of the crystals land quite close to the man's crotch, causing him to exclaim in shock. Using the falling crystals as leverage, the saintess jumps toward the dragon mother. Once she gets close to her face, she uses her transcendent sword skill and lands several slashes across her body with another skill called Steel Tempest. Meanwhile, inside the cave, the dragon egg soon hatches, and the little dragon finds its way outside. The purple dragon mother, on the other hand, seems to have been seriously injured as blood pours from her, and she transforms back into her human form. The sword saintess watches her from a cliff, dissatisfied that she only got to hit her eye when she was aiming for the head. Angry, the dragon mother calls her a crazy B-word and promises to fight her to the death. Suddenly, the little dragon that just hatched flies toward the sword saintess to stop her from hurting his mom. The little dragon flies down to help his mother, but ends up falling to the ground. When the dragon mother sees him, she quickly tells him to run away to the place in his memory, as it's the only safe place. Not long after, the dragon mother is beheaded, and the little dragon quickly flies away with tears in his eyes. The mage who accompanied the sword saintess quickly appears and asks her to let him deal with this small fry. The man fires an energy beam at the little dragon, who, in turn, spits a green liquid on his face that burns him terribly. After applying a potion to the burning spot, the man gets up with huge burn marks and threatens to stew the little black lizard. However, it turns out that the little dragon is long gone, and the sword saintess decides to spare its life because it didn't harm any of the citizens. She decides that it's time to go provide support to the team fighting the goblins, and swears to personally eliminate the goblins that threaten Brighttown. After the sword saintess and mage leave, the little dragon returns to the corpse of its mother to mourn. With tears in his eyes, he promises to take her back to the dragon's lair to find a way to revive her, but his little body can't seem to carry her weight. Eventually, he falls on his back after exhaustion kicks in, and apologizes to his dead mother because he'll have to devour her to gain the strength to bring her back. After devouring her, he evolves into a much bigger dragon and carries his mother's head to the dragon's nest. When he reaches there, he roars loudly to signal the other dragons, but he's quickly subdued by a fierce dragon who jumps on him from above. After the dragon subdues him, he announces to the Dragon King that they've caught the strange outsider, but the little dragon keeps crying for his mother's head, which had been displaced from him. When the Dragon King appears, he asks if that's the head of Filba, the purple dragon mother, and asks who the new dragon is. Quickly, he responds that it's his mother's head, and that he found this place based on memories he inherited. As he pleads with them to save his mother, the other dragons notice that the sharp cuts and a holy aura make it clear that it was a woman's doing, which is a pity because Filba inherited the old Dragon King's crystal power. However, one other dragon wonders who told her to go into the world on her own. While they're talking, the Dragon King detects that the little dragon is her child but recognizes that he's not a pure dragon. When he asks who his father is, the dragon confesses that he's never met his father, but his mother said his father was a goblin. The mention of being fathered by a goblin causes utter bewilderment among the other dragons, and they mention that it's a disgrace to the dragon race. One of them pleads with the Dragon King to let him eat the little bastard, but the king tells them to hold on. He reasons that this little guy is the grandson of the old Dragon King, and since the Dragon King is dead, the entire dragon race is left with this only crystal dragon bloodline. However, since he's of goblin species, the little guy is going to have to withstand the test if he wants to stay. After a while, the Dragon King tells him that he has to survive a fight and defeat the dragon close to him if he wants them to save his mother. When he hears that, the dragon, who has been aching to take a piece of the little guy, thanks the king for allowing him to have some fun. Within a few seconds, the huge dragon gobbles up the little guy and gives a hearty belch, while the others watch in surprise. Suddenly, the dragon belches out flames and collapses to the ground, pleading for the others to help him because the little dragon seems to be biting his stomach. However, the others refuse to lend a hand because it's the king's decision, and he has to win on his own. Suddenly, the little guy tears through his stomach and flies into the air, glad that he survived and will be able to save his mother. When he finally calms down, the king tells him that he's a member of the dragon's lair from now on, and his name will be Nidhogg. That sounds exciting. But he asks how they're going to revive his mother. The king asks him to take Filba's head to find the world tree. Apparently, the head has to be grafted to the roots of the world tree, and that's the only way to revive her. Meanwhile, Lin gets the summary of his next simulation from the system about how he took advantage of the cave terrain, set traps and defenses, and, with the help of the elves and vampires, fought off the invasion of the adventurers. However, he lost many of his men but won with a great victory in the end. The time progress of this actually taking place is 1 day. Our boy has already made preparations for the adventurers' invasion, but he wants to speed up the progress and reach the day of great success. When the system asks him if he wants to cross over to the simulation progress, he accepts. Immediately, he reaches the point where they finish the fight, and his men celebrate over a heap of the adventurers' dead bodies. Many high goblins died, but these hundreds of corpses are enough to allow the remaining big goblins to quickly evolve into heroic species and increase their combat effectiveness. After devouring more than 100 corpses, the goblins finally reach level 50 and complete their evolution. They evolve into gluttons, with strength over 1100 and a skill called gluttony that increases their health the more they eat. Some other goblins evolve into giant hammer goblins, while others evolve into dark goblins. After the vampires consume the blood from the dead adventurers, Lilith commends Lin's resourcefulness because it's been a long time since she's drunk human blood so satisfactorily. To repay him, she informs him that she sent someone to find out the whereabouts of the sword saintess. Apparently, after the sword saintess learned that hundreds of adventurers had died, she left Brighttown on a carnivorous horse. Hearing that the sword saintess left town excites Lin because he can finally breathe some fresh air. Suddenly, one of the goblins rushes in to notify Lin that something bad has happened. Apparently, a group of goblins from another tribe were seen heading toward their cave. This surprises Lin because there are no other goblin tribes within 100 miles, so he suspects that they might be the previous owners of the cave they're in. Everyone quickly goes to their stations to prepare for the incoming threat, which turns out to be a level 50 beast goblin with an overall strength of 800 who is leading several of his subordinates. When Lin scans his attributes, he sees that he's a kind of hero he's never seen before, and his strength is quite impressive. Our boy quickly orders his men to capture this guy alive, because they may be on a special task from a larger tribe. One of Lin's squad leaders, Gabuti, asks the boss to leave them to handle it. Meanwhile, as the intruders enter, the beast goblin notices a faint smell of blood. He suspects that some food must have slipped into the cave and prepares the others for a big meal. The moment they step in, Gabuti quickly slashes the beast goblin and runs past him in a split second, realizing they're in enemy territory. The small goblins quickly surround the beast goblin in a bid to protect him. Suddenly, Goblin Kwang appears and grabs one of the goblins, and the rest scurry off to safety when they realize it's a mutated goblin. As the little goblins try to escape, the other mutated goblins push spikes through the ground to impale them. The disoriented beast goblin remains in shock as he realizes that his nest has been occupied and he has to go back to report to the Lord. He considers his subordinates a bunch of useless cowards who can't deal with these low-level goblins, but suddenly he collapses to the ground after being poisoned by something one of the mutant goblins released into the land. Not long after, the beast goblin wakes up in chains and screams at Lin to get out of his face. The goblin wonders how a low-level scum like him can question him and threatens to eat him. Lin decides that he still needs a little more beating to adjust. However, the huge beast scoffs, saying that Lin expects a beast like him to be afraid of being beaten. 10 minutes later, after several weapons have been used and drenched in the monster's blood, the beast goblin pleads for mercy and promises to answer any question Lin has because he can't bear it anymore. Satisfied, Lin asks him which tribe he's from, where the tribe is, and why he's here. The beast goblin promptly replies that he's from the Beast King tribe in the western demonic forest. Apparently this cave was their residence before, and their boss asked him to come and get something, but he didn't expect to find them here. After hearing that, Lin asks what class the leader of their tribe is. The goblin responds that their boss is now the Goblin Lord, but will soon evolve into a dominant one, which shocks Lin. Apparently the goblins were sent to get a treasure that's quite important to their lord, and he leads Lin to where the treasure is. It's a level 7 Fetu magic ring created by the former leader of the Ghoul clan, which can seal an opponent's soul into the ring by collecting the target's blood. Our boy didn't expect to find something so valuable there, so the beast goblin pleads that Lin let him go since he helped him find the treasure. Our boy agrees that he'll let his body go, but he's going to take his soul, so he uses the ring on him. The petrified goblin watches as a green spiritual energy from the ring sucks out his soul and gives it to Lin, granting him a 200-point increase in strength. It's just a 200-point increase, but it will be much different for a powerful soul. Since the overall strength of the Beast King is definitely comparable to that of a full human city, Lin decides to make a move on him soon to take advantage of his power to deal with the human race. While he's thinking, the Goblin Slayer approaches him and asks if this is the Goblin from the Beast King tribe. Lin wonders how she knows about it, so she tells him she just naturally does, and he can't afford to offend them because the Beast King tribe is under the jurisdiction of the Great Tomb, and even the Lionheart Empire is not qualified to fight against it. She confesses that even she doesn't dare mess with the tribe. When Lin asks about the Great Tomb, she says it's the ruler of thousands of miles of demonic forests in the west of the continent. Apparently, a monster that's at least level 12 lives inside it, which is a world-class existence. That intrigues Lin, and he affirms the information. Finally, she asks him what he plans to do. He asks for her help to control the Beast Goblin with blood. He asked her to order him to return to the Beast King tribe and report the truth about the robbery of the ring, but to blame the royal aristocracy of the Lionheart Empire as the ones who stole the ring. The Slayer looks shocked when she hears that he wants to blame the lords of the Lionheart Empire, namely Stanman and Pheromones. Our boy affirms her words and explains that he deliberately let Caesar go in order to set up an ambush in advance, so he can use Loder as a hostage and wipe them out to get more experience packs. Meanwhile, in the Lionheart capital, Count Pheromone orders Prince Caesar to get out because he has brought shame to the family. However, Caesar explains that the goblins are not only powerful, but also very intelligent, and they're no match for them. He recounts that the Grey Hats are all dead, and he also found Loder there. Regardless, the angry lord rebukes him for still having a loud mouth when the eldest sons of two families were defeated by the goblins and have brought scorn from those outside. Trembling, Caesar bows to his father and apologizes for letting him down. Just the memory of Lin's cruelty causes him to shiver, and he cries that the goblins are so scary. Angrily, Lord Pheromone labels him a disgrace and orders the guards to drag him out. Suddenly, Count Stanman steps in and tries to pacify Count Pheromone, saying there's no need to be so angry. He proposes that they join hands to wash away the shame from their family, but Pheromone reminds him that His Majesty has ordered that all the soldiers of nobles above the rank of Viscount remain on standby at all times and cannot be mobilized at will. When he mentions that His Majesty has already sent a message to the Sword Saintess, and there's no need for them, Stanman replies that his vision is small, because leaving the Sword Saintess to solve all the problems is going to make the king believe that both of their families are incompetent. Those words shock Pheromone, so Stanman says the only way to convince the king is to let Caesar go to him and report the situation with the goblins. That way, each of them can mobilize thousands of soldiers that can even take on the goblin overlord. Eventually, Pheromone plays along and orders that the rubbish follow him to see the king, referring to Caesar. A few days later, Lin does some shooting practice on an apple he placed on Loder's head, which almost gives the poor man a heart attack, as the other goblins watch. Luckily, Lin doesn't miss his shots, and Loder accuses him of being a monster. After making the shots, Lin is pleased that the homemade pistol was so useful, even though it consumes a bit of gunpowder. A female elf standing nearby watches the demonstration excitedly and pleads with the boss to teach her how to fight too, so he promises to do so. Suddenly, Gobuti rushes in to inform the boss that a large number of fully armed human troops have gathered in a town known as Guangming Town. Gobusin also mentions that he had noticed a lot of goblins approaching, and it looks like they're from the Beast King tribe. Hearing that brings a smirk across Lin's face, and it looks like the fun is about to begin. Meanwhile, the beast goblin that Lin released eventually returns to his king and informs him that the human army came to snatch the ring, and it was very difficult for him to escape. Annoyed, the king orders the goblins to gather to eat the humans and get the ring back. While that's happening, the new mayor of Guangming Town welcomes Lord Pheromone and Lord Stanman. Immediately, Stanman asks where the Sword Saintess is, and the mage that accompanies the Saintess steps forward to inform them that the Saintess has left for something, and asks what the counts are doing with all this fanfare. Irritated, Stanman replies that there's no need to waste his breath on the mage since the Sword Saintess is not there. Annoyed by the comment, the mage responds that he's looking down on a dragon slayer and a brave warrior who fought alongside the Sword Saintess. So Stanman apologizes and explains they're here to defeat the goblins. While they're talking, they hear a weird noise that turns out to be a horde of goblins who have invaded the city. Although the city walls are heavily guarded, the goblins somehow manage to get in. Count Pheromone quickly orders his soldiers, the Lions of the Empire, to kill the goblins, and a fight ensues. The Count, as well as several other knights, kill several of the goblins, while the mage deals with them using his magical powers. Suddenly, Lin flies into the night sky on his dragon to enjoy the lively scene of the fight. After slaying a few goblins, Count Pheromone contemptuously mentions that the goblins are just low-level trash and don't pose any threat to them. From the look of things, he figures that the battle will be over in less than an hour if they continue like this. However, a sudden burst of energy hits his knights and horses, smashing them into the ground. The sight of what hit them bothers even Lin, and it turns out to be the fearsome Beast King, who's seen crushing one of the knights with one of his tentacles. The Beast King is a level 79 monster with an overall strength of about 3,000. Lin can't contain his shock, and he wonders how the heck this guy is so powerful. The soldiers quickly retreat at the sight of the monster, and Count Stanman wonders if the beast is a dominant species, but Pheromone tells him to let the family members deal with it. Suddenly, a group led by Stanman's daughter, Lorna, who's also Loder's cousin, appears and assures Count Stanman that they'll lure the big guy away while the soldiers deal with the rest. Stanman reminds her to be careful and not to be a loser like Loder, so the team charges toward the monster. One of them, who's a mage, fires at the Beast King with a blast of fire from his hands, grabbing the monster's attention. When they get its attention, they run away to lure it out of the city. However, Lin doesn't like that idea because they'll be luring the monster toward his own people, but he keeps watching them go. Not long after the Beast King has crushed their mage and knight, one of the warriors refuses to believe the monster is much more than just a goblin and threatens to take its teeth as their first trophy. That guy, along with another member of their team, continues to besiege the monster so that Lorna can have a chance to land a fatal attack. While they're distracting the monster, Lorna charges toward it, hell-bent on winning this real battle because she needs to be a role model, especially since she's now out of college. With intense determination, she leaps into the sky with her sword and blasts a hole through the monster's chest with a powerful energy beam. Meanwhile, Lin gauges that her overall strength is 1,700, while the others are around 1,000. He hadn't expected the fight to last this long, so it's quite interesting. The irritated Beast King curses at Lorna and asks how she could dare attack him sneakily. Annoyed, the monster releases a terrible energy from its mouth that wrecks the entire space.